Okay, we will now move on to House Bill 150, which is sponsored by Representative Osinski. And Representative, are you all set?
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, committee members. You have before you House Bill 150, the Delaware Marijuana Control Act. This act allows adults over the age of 21 to legally possess and consume under 1 ounce of marijuana for personal use, and creates the legal framework to license and regulate a new industry that will create well-paying jobs for Delawareans, while striking a blow against the criminal element which profits from the thriving illegal market in our state. The bill would establish a marijuana control enforcement fee assessed at point of sale, set at 15%, which is both comparable with tax rates in the region and will keep prices competitive with the existing illegal market values. HB150 allows for the issuance of up to 30 retail licenses, 30 manufacturing licenses, 60 cultivation licenses, and 5 testing licenses to be used within 16 months of the bill's effective date. It also would establish a competitive licensing process using a scoring system that rewards applicants for community benefit things such as paying a living wage, providing employer-paid health insurance, providing sick and paid leave to workers, hiring more full-time workers, focusing on diversity of workforce and other factors. In the past 2 years, we have listened to concerns from communities that have, for decades, been negatively impacted by the prohibition of marijuana. To try to undo some of the harm done and ensure that these same communities will benefit from the new legal market, we have allowed for the expungement of most prior marijuana offenses and have created a new social equity license pool. This pool is open to Delawareans who either live in a disproportionately affected area or have either been convicted of a marijuana-related offense or are the child of a person convicted of a marijuana-related offense. Half of the first round of retail licenses, 2 testing licenses, and a third of the cultivation and manufacturing licenses will be awarded to the pool of social equity applicants. In addition, the bill includes a handful of other provisions to give social equity applicants a leg up in competing with big multi-state operators, such as a discounted fees, waivers, technical assistance, and loans. The bill also creates a special license pool for Delaware-owned marijuana micro businesses in cultivation and manufacturing. Think of these businesses as the craft growers of Delaware's marijuana industry, like Dogfish Head versus Budweiser. The micro business provision ensures that local small businesses have an opportunity to grow and thrive in Delaware, and this new industry isn't dominated by the big corporate entities. A few additional details about enforcement and use of marijuana. Enforcement will be handled by the Division of Alcohol and Tobacco Enforcement through a new office of the Marijuana Control Commissioner. This will reduce duplication of services and reduce startup costs. HB 150 would not change existing state law regarding driving under the influence of an illicit or recreational drug. It also would not allow individuals to grow their own plants. Public consumption of marijuana would still be illegal. Employer enforcement largely would not change. Employers would be permitted to drug test workers for marijuana to ensure any zero tolerance policies are being followed, as well as prohibit the consumption of marijuana at work. No longer would a person in legal possession of marijuana be considered a person prohibited from owning and possessing a firearm. Now, I understand HB 150, this is this is the first step here in committee. And I understand today we are here to listen to concerns. We'll hear from some of our state agencies that have concerns, and this is the first step. We still have to go through appropriations, and this bill will not be heard on the House floor until after our Easter break sometime, possibly end of April or early May. So at this time, we do want to hear those concerns so we can get back to, so we can get to work and address some of these if we can. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll take questions from committee.
Thank you, Representative Osinski. I just want to point out just my own view on all the work you've done. I appreciate how committed you are to this and all the hard work you've put into this. This is, I think, the product you've come up with here is a testament to all the hard work you've done to really legislate this thing and get it to a place where it's in a really good spot. And I think much better off as it is now than the previous iterations we've seen of this. While I was supportive of those as well, you've really put in the work, I think, to bring people to the table and get this to a good place. So I'll obviously be supporting its release, and I thank you again for all your hard work and all the advocates' hard work to just continue to push on this and continue to make the legislation better. I have Representative Morrison.
Permission to speak on behalf of the legislation.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Chairman Bentz. I appreciate the time to explain why I'm so passionate about cannabis legalization. First, what we often don't talk about is that cannabis prohibition is rooted in racism. In the 1930s and the 1940s, the first commissioner of the U.S. Treasury Department's Federal Bureau of Narcotics, Harry Jacob Anslinger, began a war on cannabis specifically to target Mexican Americans and Black Americans. Anslinger is responsible for cannabis prohibition in America. He and his bureau especially targeted Black Americans as the Jazz Age grew and as Black Americans moved northward. In fact, Anslinger is on record as saying horrible racist things, including vile racial epithets I will not repeat here today. But amongst other things, he said that marijuana makes Black people think they are as good as white people. He also said, and I quote, "The primary reason to outlaw marijuana is its effect on the degenerate races." I also quote, "There are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the U.S., and most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing result from marijuana use. This causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others." Decades later, cannabis prohibition was still being used to target Black Americans and other individuals. Decades ago, John Ehrlichman, who served as President Richard Nixon's domestic policy chief, said, "You want to know what this is really all about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and Black people. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be against the war or Black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies and the Blacks with marijuana and heroin, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." Today, cannabis prohibition continues to devastate communities of color and individuals of a lower socioeconomic status. Also, we know that many Delawareans suffer from medical conditions that can be helped substantially by cannabis treatment. We should allow anyone to treat such conditions with cannabis. Finally, unfortunately, we know that myths and disinformation abound regarding cannabis legalization. These myths are not borne out by scientific empirical evidence, as I'm sure we will hear during public comment today. For these reasons and more, I urge my fellow committee members to release this bill from committee. Even if committee members do not personally support the passage of this legislation, please remember that a majority of Delawareans do, across all political parties and independent voters. At the very least, this legislation deserves debate and a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives. Thank you, Chairman Bentz and my fellow committee members for your time.
Thank you, Representative Morrison. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few comments and a few questions. First, Representative Osinski, I want to commend you on all of the work that you've done related to this legislation and all of the many conversations that you've had with different groups and how you have made modifications to earlier versions of the legislation to be inclusive of feedback that was provided to you. So I wanted to say thank you for that first and to acknowledge the work that you've done. I want to speak specifically to subchapter 3, which establishes the criteria for the social equity applicant. And it says it requires the commissioner to develop a financial assistance and technical assistance program to aid social equity applicants. So I have questions specifically about that. So related to the social equity applicants, is that for Delawareans only?
The answer to that question is yes. They have to reside the last 5 of 10 years in Delaware.
Wonderful, thank you. Related to the process, who will collaborate with the commissioner to ensure that the financial assistance and technical assistance programs that they will stand up will work as intended? My hope is that I want us to get this right upon implementation and not a let's keep working to get it right.
Yeah, I agree. And we do need to get it right. And this may be something that we need to continue to work on. Basically, the language in the legislation is tasking the new appointed commissioner to work with the Division of Small Business, which they do have a seat on the Oversight Committee to implement these financial programs. We understand there could be complications in there due to the continuing federal classification of cannabis, but other states have worked through this. So during the promulgation of regulations, they'll be doing the research necessary to find out how other states have made this work, and we will be implementing them also. So the language may be a little vague in the bill because we know there's some things we need to work through.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that response. I will just add one thing, that when the teams, the commissioner and the teams get to the point of actually creating the process, that in addition to including the Division of Small Business, also be sure to include those stakeholders that would be possibly a part of the process and in taking advantage of the technical assistance and being a part of the social equity program. Again, Representative Osinski, thank you for the work that you've put forth in bringing this to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. Representative Briggs King.
Thank you, Mr. Open dialogue with sponsor, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Representative Osinski, for your introduction. And I'm very glad to see that this bill has been placed in health, because I think it really is a serious health concern for us to have, and not so much focus on revenue, but really focus on people and the potential impacts as well. And so I'm not going to make a lot of comments because I have a lot of technical questions to ask you. And I think most of my colleagues know I like to prepare. This is it's really a very complicated bill. It has several different moving parts to it. And so with that in mind, I'll try and move my questions in the order they appear in the legislation itself. And on page 4 under 1301 under A, it talks about that this is going to help eliminate the illegal market to allow law enforcement to focus on crime. Do we have any kind of data or information about how we think that's really going to happen in Delaware? What evidence do we have or research can you show us from other states where they've actually reduced the illegal market?
Let's see. Thank you for the question. And well, we've learned that the competition is the best way to impact the illegal market. And that's why we we had the choice on where to put the tax. And of course, some think we're going too low. We wanted to make sure that we had the tax, the 15% set, so we could be competitive and hurt the illegal market. We feel that the consumers would actually be willing to pay a little bit more, knowing that they could go to a establishment that is licensed, that is legal, that is regulated, so they're ensured that they're getting a safe product. We've also tasked the commissioners and the oversight committee to review the impact of this legislation on the illegal market. And they are required to report back to the General Assembly biannually after reviewing. And there's a long list of things that they're tasked to study. And one of them is the impact on the illegal market. So if this passes and it's implemented, we may see future legislation or recommendations come to us if the black market is still thriving.
So we don't know, but we're just saying we suspect that this should help to determine the criminal element that's related to this. I know one of the basic complaints I hear now is from people on medicinal marijuana is the cost, that it's far more costly. And I will explain to them, well, it's because you're not taking a risk of an unknown substance or fentanyl added or something else. And so appreciate that answer. If I can move on down so that you can clarify for me disproportionately impacted areas, it's later on under 1302 where it talks about means an infected, an area identified by the commissioner. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be an incorporated or a municipality.
We did not want to specifically pick out the location. So we're asking the commissioner to use state data such as Delgis to come up with those areas. And we do have some parameters about the size, but we've asked the commissioner to use all available state data to determine the impacted areas.
For example, I represent only one incorporated area, but I have a very large district. And anybody that knows my district knows that a large area of my district would certainly fit into this disproportionately impacted area where I have significantly high addictions, significantly high trafficking and other things going on. It's unincorporated. And so the two concerns I have are where we talk about disproportionately impacted area, but then later on in the bill, we talk about locality, but there's no local control mentioned for my county. And so that's very concerning for me when we get deeper back into the bill under page 30, when we're talking about local control title 22. I had some very specific concerns that have been expressed to me by the county because it doesn't seem that we're giving them the same ability to regulate or monitor or have local decisions that we're allowing the city to do. Had there been any discussion or consideration about this disproportionately impacted area and the locality definitions?
Yeah, we specifically put language in there and under the definition of local that does apply only to municipalities, incorporated municipalities, towns, and they could pass ordinances to prohibit the establishment of these businesses. The county authority would be strictly under land use. And there is a process if the county is considering an applicant for land use that somebody can submit in writing a complaint or a concern. And we list that there would be, I think, if the county received 10 of those, that the commissioner would have to set up a review and a hearing. So the public will have input on these establishments, but we have not given the county the ability to prohibit what the intent of this legislation is. But they still have the local authority over jurisdiction when it comes to zoning.
Okay, thank you. And I will share that information back. Just a few more questions for you if I can then. And it's not really covered in legislation, it's just a broad thing. I always like to think about the ramifications of the money issue or the financial issues here. And we know that because of certain federal laws still prohibiting marijuana and still classifying it, what do you see happening in Delaware with the proceeds from these, from any part of it, either from the grower, from the manufacturer, to the distributor, to the facility that's making other goods and products from the substance?
I had a discussion with the Department of Finance about that. They have not verified if the bank that the state of Delaware uses would allow that, but they could research what other states have been doing. Some say it may have to be a different form of a financial institution, but other states have found ways to work around that, and this would be something our Department of Finance would have to also look into.
Thank you, because I know that it has, it's been a big concern, even when you get down to the security of where those funds are going, how they're maintained. Many of them are warehoused, because they can't actually be deposited into financial institutions. So just a question for that, that I had with that. When we talk about, I'm very concerned here about the adequate labeling and notices. I have served on various committees, as many of you know, related to substance exposed infants, things related to cancer consortium, smoking, all of these things. It doesn't matter whether it's regular tobacco or it's marijuana, have a propensity to create serious health issues. So concerned about the appropriate labeling of such, that people know that it's harmful, that it has been the different diseases that it has been associated with, particularly in pregnancy. So I don't see anything where we're specifically requiring certain labeling like we would if somebody were going to manufacture tobacco products, much similar to making sure they don't provide additives that make the flavor, the smell, or whatever. If we're trying to prohibit that for cigarettes, should that also not be the same, for instance, for marijuana products?
Yes, we do have that concern. And if you look at the legislation, it starts on 559, requirements for marijuana products sold or distributed by marijuana establishments. They need to list the length of time it typically takes for a product to take effect, the amount of marijuana in the product using the standard established in this section, not to exceed 10 milligrams. They need to designate the serving size and the number of servings in each package, not to exceed 5 servings. They need to list the ingredients and possible allergens. They need to list the nutritional fact panel. They need to put that on the packaging. The requirement for information on packaging may not be misleading to consumers, the specific batch number of the product, and educational information for consumers to educate customers, including evidence-based information about how to interpret the information on the label. So, and then there's also the child resistance packaging, which must be designed or constructed to be significantly difficult for a child under 5 years of age to open, and not difficult for normal adults. So we have addressed that, and we learned a lot of this stuff from our medical program.
On line 146, we talked about a testing facility to determine potency and contaminants. What kind of standards will they be using, and how will they acquire those standards for that? For instance, if you're in a forensic area and you generally have a standard that you go to in order to ensure the quality or whatever the product, who is manufacturing standards for this, for our agency that's going to be looking at these testing facilities?
We're tasking the commissioner went through promulgating of regulations, and also the director of our medical program will be on this oversight panel. Some of the basics that we put in here is what we learned from our medical program. We also know the science is ever evolving in this. There's some new industry out there, and there's some biotech companies that are doing some research on cannabis And we're going to, part of the oversight committee is to evolve our regulations and our requirements as these new technologies come forth. So our goal is to educate the public on the consumption of this, and also to make it the safest product as possible, because that, again, gives us a leg up over the illegal market. So we know it's a priority and it's a goal.
What happens when they do testing and they realize that that product is either contaminant or has other issues? What happens to the actual, because that's probably just a small portion of a product that's not going to be acceptable. What happens to that failed product so that it's not distributed? Who takes possession of it, and what happens to it to make sure it doesn't get to market?
Yeah, that again is something we looked at closely, because we do not want to divert product to the illegal market. So we do have the seed to sale tracking. And if some of those seeds, those plants have been not passed through the testing process, such as the use of pesticides and whatnot, or mold, those plants will be pulled and destroyed. And this will be all done through the tracking system of seed to sale. So we don't want to give the opportunity to divert any product whatsoever into the illegal market.
So the grower will be responsible for that, or will the agency itself make sure that they are taking the product and destroying it?
This will be a requirement all through the process. As you know, it starts with the cultivators, and then that process could possibly move to manufacturers for oils and edibles, or the flower could go directly to retail. The seed to sale will be constantly tracked by the commissioner. I think that should have answered your question. Yeah. If it gets from cultivator to manufacturer, it's tracked. And then once from manufacturing to retail, it's all tracked through the seed to sale process.
Okay. If I can move on down in lines 164, we talk about the retail marijuana store. Some of my questions here come in to how we're defining person, because that's defined, in other sections of the law about being corporate. It can be a corporation or whatever. And I see a couple places where we're using entity. So like in line 164, we're talking about retail marijuana store means an entity licensed to purchase. So it doesn't use the term person. And later on in that same section, it talks about marijuana products to consumers. Previously, we've been this language has been very specific to say individual. So I'm just wondering if we shouldn't be consistent in this whole section to make sure that entity and person are the same, and that consumer and individual. And I'm taking to mean that a consumer is an individual over the age of 21. But I don't want to take that for granted, and it sort of there's different sections of this that uses one reference and then the other reference.
Yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that, but I do understand, and I did check with our attorneys, the term person in code, in Delaware code, could be defined as corporation, business entity, and whatnot. So we are aware of that. But if there is any confusion there with, consumer compared to person, meaning an entity or a corporation, we would be definitely happy to clear that up.
Yeah, because it comes later on in the text in there too, when we're talking about the individual, and we talk about the individual purchasing versus giving to someone under the age. And that's why it sort of drew my attention a little bit. And I think one of my colleagues had mentioned earlier, Kendra Johnson, about subchapter 3. And I just have some concerns about the scoring, because we're not able to look at anything now. You've told us how you envision that, but not what percentage or how that will be weighted. Could you just tell me a little bit about how you envision that, or how you think that will go, because what you think may not be what comes out of the regulatory process. And so if you could tell me a bit, about the weighted score. It looks to me like the city is definitely given preference over any other area. And that's just if you could explain for me, please.
Yeah, our goal here was we know businesses are going to be eager to apply for licenses. I mean, we've heard the term the golden ticket, and we've learned from other states that we don't feel we'll have a lack of applicants. What we really wanted to address, there's benefits for Delaware, one for entrepreneurs that will be applying for license. But the other benefit, of course, is the community benefits, and that would be your employees that would be, that this bill creates these jobs for Delawareans. So we wanted to somehow address this without, having strict requirements. So we've learned from other states of a criteria, and it's not new to Delaware. We have big criterias, criteria scoring. So we wanted to follow those lines, and many of the criteria, and there is a lengthy list there. A lot of it pertains to safety. A lot of it pertains to business knowledge, training, hours for employees. So we did compile a list of criteria for the commissioner to include. Now, he may include more. It does not just limit it to the ones that we spell out. But these are requirements or criteria that we ask the applicant to answer. Basically, there are questions. Now, he may say, no, he's not going to establish that criteria, but he could score higher and better on other criteria. We did not specifically want to put weight to those. This will be left up to the commissioner and the oversight committee.
Because I did, when you're looking at that and you see that, there's an expectation for the person to have expertise, training, and experience. Well, that they've not gotten that in Delaware. And so that would mean primarily you would be looking for somebody that's had that expertise experience is going to be coming from another state. So that was one of the concerns, that if we're trying to be entrepreneurial and do this for Delawareans, unless they've gone off somewhere and then they're coming back, that would defeat some of the other things that were mentioned in the bill. But
they could also contract with somebody. I mean, they could submit a plan. So they could be contracting with somebody with the experience or have a partnership with somebody that has that experience. So we definitely have a goal of getting as many Delawareans involved, and that's a tough needle to thread sometimes without coming out and specifically saying no, only Delawareans. So we try to put the language in there to meet the goal of really helping Delawareans prosper in this new created industry. But yeah, I have the same concern. We don't want a lot of out of state, the large, big marijuana industries to come in and block out all our entrepreneurs here in Delaware.
Thank you. I have other questions, but I see other hands up, and so maybe they'll have some of the same concerns. If not, I may circle back, but I know we're on time constraints here, and I don't want to take too much time with the other questions I have. So I'll yield to some of my colleagues, but thank you very much.
Okay. Trying to remember whose hand was up next. I think it was Representative Minor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Olszewski, I want to just echo what my colleague said. I commend you on the work that you've done in regards to House Bill 150. Kudos to you. I do have a question related to the social equity piece. I see that the Oversight Committee is responsible for making recommendations and providing a report to the governor. Who exactly is responsible for ensuring that the social equity piece of this legislation is actually carried out?
That would be tasked to the commissioner and the oversight committee. And we have a pretty broad base membership of, I believe it's 15 members of the Oversight Committee. And I don't have that list right in front of me, but I will pull that up. But so
I'm actually looking at it now, and I do see the Chief Officer of the Division of Diversity and Inclusion. How diverse do you see this committee being?
You see the list right there. That's the required list of appointments to the Oversight Committee.
Okay, and if this committee is going to be responsible for ensuring that the social equity piece is actually equitable, I would hope that this group is very diverse, not just maybe one minority on this group, but diverse, because that's very, very important.
Well, the social equity, they're very, they have the boundaries within the social equity they're limited to awarding those social equity applicants licenses with 3 criteria. They either have to reside within an impacted area, they have to have a marijuana conviction, a past conviction, and or a child of someone who has a past conviction. That's the guidelines and the barriers we put in this bill that require the commission to fulfill that social equity piece. They cannot go beyond that. So we have put the language in there that limits those social equity pool just to those applicants. So I think we will achieve that goal.
Are you all? Is that it, Representative Minor Brown?
Oh no, sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, my other question is just related to I can't see what line it is, but I saw in the report that the committee has to give to the governor or the commissioner to the governor that they have to include the number of persons or entities that have received financial assistance. And my question to you is, would you be open to including also the number of entities or persons that also received technical assistance? Because I think that's really important as well. And also including the effectiveness of the financial and technical assistance initiatives that were implemented.
Sure, that's a reasonable request. And those reports from your last question, it is also included in the requirement of the report to the General Assembly to track and monitor the success of the social equity applicants and who is being rewarded those. So it is a goal, and we want to track that and keep an eye on that. So yes, but thank you for the suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. And one more suggestion. Mm-hmm. Also in that same area, in that report, it would also be nice to see the number of new jobs or other forms of economic output that has been created as a result of the social equity licenses. Yes,
that I believe that's in there. It's part of the report, but if it's not, we can definitely take a look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I have Representative Postles next.
Thank you. I just need to unmute there. I have this is a complex bill, a lot of moving parts. I have a number of questions, or mostly comments, that I'd like to make. The first one is right on the first page, the second whereas, it talks about, and you had mentioned it, Representative Sinski, that the legalization would effectively eliminate the illegal market for marijuana in Delaware. I would submit that other states that are further down the road than we are, say Colorado for one, but some others as well, the Colorado Drug Task Force report has indicated that in the last 4 years, the black market, the illicit illegal market, has grown dramatically. Federal DEA reports from some other states support that same conclusion. So I think that might be a hollow claim. It certainly would have to be determined what actually happens here in Delaware. One of the points that's made, of course, is this is restricted to people that are over 21. But I don't want that to be a false promise of safety, because the reality is, again, looking at some of the states that are ahead of us in this, in this endeavor, since 2017. Again, in Colorado, that seems to be the state, Washington, a few other ones, but have the most experience here. High school students have increased up to 70% in the vaping aspect, but in overall marijuana used in the last 30 days, that's a measuring marker, how often people use it, has risen 150%. And so I think that's high school students. Further, it even talked about youth under 15 years of age. Their use has gone up by over 14%. So I think that, we can have that false sense of security that it's for over 21. The reality is that's not really how it's going to has played out in other states. And part of that, I think, is young people have they have a false sense of, well, if it's legal, it must be okay. There's no danger to it. It must be okay. So whether I'm under 21 or not doesn't really make a difference. So I have some concerns about that. One of the things, a lot of this bill seems to be concerned about legalizing or decriminalizing the use of marijuana. Rather, I have a concern really about the effect of the drug on people. And one of the things that research has shown over several years is that the brains of our young people continue to develop until mid-20s. So even setting a cutoff at the age of 21, there's still a lot of development that will continue in our young people. And there is good science that has shown that there are some negative effects of use of marijuana. There are certainly some physical effects that affect the body. Memory loss has been one of the things. There have been, some situations where heart damage or lung damage or other things have occurred. One of the big things, of course, is the mental health aspect of it. And I think that clearly there are some risks of anxiety and depression and increase in suicidal thoughts. And so those sorts of things really do concern me, not so much the physical aspect of how we handle the bill, but what is the effect of the drug on our kids particularly, but even in the broader sense of the safety issues, which have been raised in states where it's legalized, where they have seen the DUIs have increased at a significant rate once marijuana was legalized. So I think that's a very much a concern. Along with that, I've heard from a number of business people, the community has some concerns how this is going to affect their employees, how it's even more going to affect their liability exposure, and how it will affect the performance of their employees. Obviously, decrease in motor response time, and is one of the known effects of using marijuana. It affects judgment as well. And so they have expressed a lot of concern about what the effect's going to be on their business from a liability standpoint. So there's a lot of questions that I have about the rest of the bill, about some of the mechanics, but I'm primarily more interested in the effect of drugs on people and how it will affect people, because I think that's the big serious issue. Thank you.
Yep, Representative, I agree with you. And, I think there's, even in states that have not legalized, there will be cases of minors purchasing cannabis through the illegal market. And, if we do this right and we keep focusing on eliminating the black market, it will be regulated and controlled just like alcohol. But we know, minors will eventually get their hands on alcohol too. It's a concern. And I've spoke to some of my legislative colleagues in Colorado, and, they admit they may not have got it right the first time. And they run 2 to 3 bills, each session to address those concerns as they develop. And with the business community, we did not touch anything that currently exists in Delaware law today. Delaware remains a at-will state. Employers will be allowed to have zero tolerance, basically prohibiting a probation on marijuana for certain employees. And I understand that in certain industries, when they're operating heavy equipment or truck drivers, those employers will still have the right to have a zero drug policy, meaning if one of their employees does consume, and even if it was days before and he tests positive, that employer still has that at will right to terminate or take whatever action he feels fit. So we have no way in this legislation, no way altered the employer's right to have a zero tolerance. And we're trying to address the issue of making sure employees are educated about that, and also focus on minors of getting their hands on cannabis. But thank you for your concerns.
Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have a few questions for the sponsor, please. And I think I'll probably focus in on that second whereas, the illegal, the concept that we will do away with the black market. So I'd like to ask, do you think, Representative Osinski, could you describe the expenses that a legal manufacturer and or seller would have to deal with to operate a marijuana business in Delaware under your bill?
Representative Collins, no, I would not. And I would assume a lot of it is not cultivated or manufactured here in Delaware. I could pretty much say it's probably coming from out of state. It's an illegal market. We don't know where it's coming from, how it's been handled.
No, you understand I'm talking about legal, the legal marijuana, not illegal.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So the question was how much, well, it's...
What expenses would a legal grower or seller in Delaware encounter based on the provisions of your bill?
Well, there's several licenses. So I guess the retail license would have the least amount of capital, and your cultivation license would have the highest level of capital. I have no way of knowing what that is, but I assume a capital investment, it would be rather large. We also offer a amount of outdoor cultivation, which would probably have less capital needs. But no, to answer your question, I do not know what the capital costs would be.
Well, I'm also talking about operating costs. For example, is there not a tax? What is the tax rate you're planning on this?
It would be a 15% at point of sale. So that would be at the retail, end, the point of sale product.
Okay, and most of these folks would end up, I've heard it mentioned a number of times, employees. So they would have to pay those wages, would they not?
Yes, when you employ somebody, they usually won't work for you unless they're being compensated with wages, yes.
And then the bill talks a lot about regulation.
Yes.
And anytime there's regulation for a business, there are many costs involved with that in terms of legal fees, the cost of complying with the regulations. I mean, you agree with that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, here's the problem with the black market. They really don't have any of that. So what's going to happen is the people of Delaware are going to say, wow, marijuana is now legal. And as it's been testified here, other states have seen large increases in the number of people seeking marijuana. And at the same time, if someone only has less than an ounce in their car or with, on their person, then they are not committing any kind of a crime. So the black market folks, will you explain to me how, given that the black market folks can continue to provide this product at a very low price and obviously much lower than what any commercial grower could possibly do under this bill, how it will not be a boon to the black market?
Well, we can take history here in the United States and use the prohibition of alcohol as an example. When that prohibition existed, it was a boom for the illegal market, and it was a criminal enterprise, and it had many, many negative effects on our community, and that's why it was recognized and appealed, and those illegal enterprises came crashing down. So it could take a while, but I use that example because I think in the cannabis industry, you're going to have the same outcome. We need to end this prohibition and regulate this and make it a legal market. Yes, you can still buy moonshine, but is it thriving? No.
Well, I would like to point out that on alcohol, you have to have large manufacturing facilities. It takes a lot of time. You have to transport huge quantities. It's just not practical. Marijuana can be grown anywhere by anybody. It's the easiest thing in the world. I'll tell you a little story about when I was in college many years ago. A friend of mine grew some marijuana, just a few plants in his backyard. One day he realized he had a little more than he was comfortable with given the laws at that time. So he put out some questions. Who would want to buy this? For like 8 or 10 plants, he got an offer of $10,000. These plants are worth, just one plant, thousands of dollars. The amount of corruption that will come about is beyond our imagining. Could I ask you this? What will happen to a person in Delaware who is employed by a trucking company, has a CDL, and other types of jobs where they have background checks, federal requirements for drug testing, etc. If they start to use marijuana, having been told that it is legal, what will happen when they get their first drug test for that CDL or comparable situation?
I believe those industries already have zero tolerance drug testing. So, and it's not like we're inventing this product, it's out there now. So I think most employees, when they are employed, they are informed about zero tolerance drug testing policies. So most of your employees, or no, all of your employees are quite aware of what their employer's policies are at the point of employment.
But the problem there is if we have people that would like to get a job, and right now I see tons of job offers for CDL drivers, but many of these folks will have found too late that they will not be eligible. Well, I have one last comment. This is not the day for the huge argument. For one thing, here's the main thing. This bill was introduced 6 days ago, a 49-page bill. And based on my email, I would say so far that basically only the advocates even know it exists. I assure you, I know personally as a legislator, I'm on several committees. I have another heavy-duty hearing shortly, had 2 yesterday. I have not had time to study a 49-page bill in great detail, but more important than that, I have not been able to check with sources, with references to find out some of the information that I would like to have before I got involved with any kind of heavy-duty legislation like this. But I did find this. This is in the 2017 report of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. It says, the association between cannabis use and development of a psychotic disorder is supported by data synthesized in several good quality systematic reviews. The magnitude of this association is moderate to large and appears to be dose dependent. The primary literature reviewed by the committee confirms the conclusions of the systematic reviews, including the association between cannabis use and psychotic outcome and the dose dependency of the effects, further bolstering the overall strength of evidence for our conclusions. There are many, many, many unanswered questions. And if we're going to do this, it needs to be done in an educated fashion with great deliberation to make sure we're not doing more harm than good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Representative. And, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is a first step for this legislation, but the public has been aware that this was coming forth. We must have had 4 major press publications put out, Business Times, Delaware First, the News Journal, I think Delaware State News. Over the last month or so, I've been giving interviews. I've sat on webinaries and conference calls with advocacy groups for and against. So the public has been aware this is coming, and it actually started in 2017 by our past legislators, Representative Helene Keeley and Senator Margaret Rose Henry. So I think it's pretty well known that this legislation is coming forth, and I've had a lot of constructive input from both sides. But thank you.
But all that is not the same as actually seeing a 49-page bill. In fact, in Delaware, we have a tradition. Most of our bills are relatively short and easy to understand. This is anything but.
Representative, if you have, as you continue to study the legislation, please contact me. Feel free to reach out with any suggestions as we move forward through this process. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have Representative Shoup next.
Thank you very much. Can I please have open dialogue with the sponsor?
Yes.
I first want to thank you for bringing this legislation forward and taking the time to develop, the many facets that go along with any legislation that deals with marijuana. I have started researching this since last year, and I have heard constituents that are completely for. I have heard constituents that are completely against, and I've heard people in the middle. So this is definitely a subject that I think bears a lot of information gathering and also a lot of discussion. So thank you for starting it with the Health Committee this year. One of the things that I'd like to start a little bit in detail, maybe broaden out, and all of my questions are really in regards to the bill, not kind of an overarching, for or against marijuana itself. But one of the things I wanted to discuss was the scoring mechanism in the bill itself. And I think that I want individuals to understand, first of all, and I think most do, that the state of Delaware is not getting into the marijuana industry, that we are hiring, we're a third party, basically. And I wanted to kind of hear from the sponsor that we're a third party that is acknowledging that this could be something that we legalize for recreational purposes, and the state is not going to be selling and growing marijuana itself.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the state is not directly involved in this industry.
Okay, and that's where the scoring mechanism in the bill comes, and that is lines 500, I believe, through 532. I did have a question. I think some of the scoring mechanism I do agree with. I think it's great to want to have employers that focus on. Let me pull it up real quick so I don't misread it myself. I've got it right here. So I think it has some great measures, making sure that the conditions of where they're working is suitable, that we focus on the wages that are going to be paid in these facilities, and other things that, line 519, providing a safe, healthy, and economical, beneficial working environment with fair scheduling practices and so on. And I think that's very important. I wanted to, if maybe you could help me understand in line 527, part of the scoring mechanism under 4A, number 4 says the criteria for the competitive scoring process for open license types must include the following. And the first thing under A is the applicant's submission of an extension signed by a bona fide labor organization, stating that the applicant has entered into a labor peace agreement with such bona fide labor organization. Could you explain exactly what that means? I'm sorry, I think you're on mute, Representative.
Thank you. Yes, that section there is a criteria, part of the scoring criteria. So we're directing the commissioner to add that question, and it pertains only to open licenses for cultivation and manufacturing. That is a total of 24% of the available 125 licenses. It's the larger license. It's a larger footprint because, we have the micro businesses with 10 employees or less. Then we have the open license category. And this is for open license category of cultivation and manufacturing only. It does not pertain to retail. It does not pertain to micro business. It does not pertain to testing. And it simply states that if a applicant so chooses to use a project labor agreement, then he can answer that question in the criteria as yes. Now, if somebody does not, they can say, no, we do not have a bona fide project labor agreement. So it is a part of the criteria that pertains to just 24% of the available licenses.
Okay. Does that language indicate that someone who uses a bona fide labor agreement under those terms would score higher on that scoring mechanism for that application than somebody that does not have a labor agreement for that construction?
Yeah, this is part of our goal for community benefits, and it does not, because we leave that up to the commissioner. We ask the commissioner to request that information, but we do not direct the commissioner on how to score that. or how to prioritize that. So to answer your question, no, it does not.
Okay. I guess I'm a little confused why that was included, especially if it doesn't impact the score, to why a bona fide labor agreement would be asked on that application for that construction of that. It seems to me, and I'm just speaking for myself, it seems to me that excludes a whole host of businesses in the private market that may not be, at the level to have a labor agreement or just starting out, or maybe are right to work or in any other situation that don't have that labor agreement.
Right.
You may bring that out and discuss it.
Sure. Yeah, you may have misunderstood my reply. I mean, it is part of the scoring. It is part of the scoring. So it is going to be considered. But as you said, a private market, an applicant is a private market. A potential business owner is a part of the private market, and he has the right to make that decision. If he so chooses to use a bona fide labor organization for his construction of his facility, all we're asking is, we want to know that. If he so chooses not to, there is no requirement that he has to. So he as a private business owner, he also has the choice on which to do. This simply says, will you make that known so it can be considered as a community benefit?
Okay, my question is, why is that considered a community benefit over someone that doesn't use?
Because research and history will tell you that bona fide labor agreement employees generally have a lot of the stuff that we already mentioned in here. We're asking applicants to pay their full-time employees good benefits, health care, and whatnot. So I do think it's a higher scale. I'm not saying the open shop contractors do not provide benefits, but it's well known and documented that labor organizations definitely have all those. Your open shop businesses may pay higher wages, but maybe no benefits, or maybe they provide good benefits and maybe not the higher wages. So I think it pertains to the community benefits of a project. We are not requiring it. Again, it is just a question on a criteria. You seem to have, there is a long list of criteria, but is this the only one that you have a concern with, or is there others in the criteria?
I think most of the other criteria is a great scale to have. I just worry about there being, if it's part of the scoring, there being a preference over a labor versus non-labor shop, and I would like to have some further discussion on that. I just don't want to, if it's part of the scoring, I don't want that to maybe potentially exclude by the scoring standards some open shops as well. And I think there's much you can say on both sides of that, but I do want to bring that up as potential discussion in the future.
Yep, there's quite a few points of the criteria, and we have not designated any kind of weight to give to any of these. I assume the applicants are going to score differently on criterias, and it would be left up to the commissioner on what he considers is a adequate and good applicant to issue a license. And again, this criteria only kicks in when there's more applicants than there are licenses, because we wanted to try to address that. You have a limited number of licenses when this rolls out and starts up. So if you read up above this criteria, it states that we're asking the commissioner to develop a scoring criteria to be used when there are more applicants than available licenses. So it only is considered when all 125, licenses are kind of issued, or if you get say 200 applicants, the scoring criteria would then take effect because we are only having 25 licenses to issue, if that helps.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got two other points if you'll, if I can. I don't have, I really think the state did a great job of getting into the medical marijuana, portion of this. As the Mayor of Milford, we actually worked with a business to get the growing of and cultivation of medical marijuana within city limits. And I think we've seen a lot of progress in that industry. I don't have any, overall moral objection to recreational marijuana. But I think it is important as we move forward with this is we already do have one, if not more, recreational drug, in the market, and that's alcohol. And we know that, if it's used properly, and obviously we can't legislate that it be used properly by everybody, but stay with me. When alcohol comes to, when we deal with road safety and we deal with worker safety with employment, we understand that there's some major challenges that we're still having with alcohol, even though it's been, since the 1930s. And there are certain protections in place for those, for road safety and for worker safety, that we've worked not only as a nation, but through the state of Delaware, and we continue to work on. And I would ask that, as we start to look at bringing another recreational drug into the market that, clouds judgment similar to alcohol, even though it's not the same, that we also continue and have these discussions of how do we protect road safety. I know there are certain safety tests, but how do we do it in a way that we understand and protect, the amount that people are consuming when they get before or after they get on the roadways, and amount they're consuming before they're in the workplace, to be safe for themselves and for other workers as well. And I think that it would help to have maybe witnesses from DSP or witnesses from worker employment, something of that level, to discuss what those protections are in place, because we do see those devastating effects still with alcohol, and it would be great to have those protections, at least the same protections, in place as we move forward with another recreational drug and introducing it into Delaware's economy.
Certainly, thank you.
And then the final thing I wanted to discuss is the fiscal note. I was looking through the fiscal note of this bill, and I'm a little confused. I see that there's a revenue of $925,000 that would come through this, but there also says there's a recurring budget needs for SDI, Delgis, and Superior Court are projected to remain funded by the general fund. And I first wanted to have a discussion about that, but then also I was confused. If you go on to, let me pick up the document. It's in the bill. The document that is House Bill number 150, and at the bottom it has cost. It's 4 pages. It's your fiscal bill that has 4 pages, and it has cost, and then it has fiscal year 2022 to 2024. Maybe I just didn't have enough time to look over it. I'm not understanding what this one-time column, the general fund column, and then the marijuana regulation fund column is in this document.
Okay. Well, the regulation marijuana fund, which is funded through the 15% tax, okay. We stayed in the bill that all costs related would be paid off the top first. And to be honest with you, I haven't had a chance to study through the fiscal note myself, but we know that any generated revenue from this program, those agencies that have costs directly from this legislation would be paid through the 15% tax. Does that answer your question?
Well, I mean, I would like to see this drawn out in some sort of profit and loss, because in year one, it looks like we're in a huge deficit. Year two, it looks like we're in a huge deficit. Year three, it doesn't, I can't really tell with this. It's not really an analysis that kind of shows us when that money is going to be generated and this program is going to start working, for itself. And I think that would be very helpful for not only the committee, but for general discussion, just like a general, business P&L to see what year will it be. And also I would, and this is just coming from me again, my suggestion would be, there's a little bullet point in this that says reoccurring budgetary needs for the SDI, Delgis, and the Superior Court are projected to remain funded by the general fund. So how long is it going to take us to get the SDI, the Delgis, and the Superior Court to be also paid for by the marijuana fund? Because we don't want to continue to take those, and it doesn't say what the cost of those are going to be. What year will it take until those are paid for the marijuana? In essence, we want this program to pay for itself first, and then we want it start to pay back. And I think that that's something, even if you're for or against, but especially if you're for, you want to know what year are we looking to get paid back, and then what year are we looking to actually put money back into things. I've heard education thrown on the table. I've heard this the $15 minimum wage thrown on the table. What year will it actually take that we can put $1 back into those systems? And I think that would be great for the discussion.
Absolutely. And then I'm sure we'll have all that information when it takes the next step into appropriations.
Thank you, Representative.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Representative Morrison.
Yes, hi, and thank you for letting me speak again. I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to make 2 quick points. First, I find it interesting that some of my Republican colleagues are suddenly concerned about public health when they adamantly opposed raising the age for tobacco to 21. The second point I will make, this is an important point at a number of levels here. It's been stated that after cannabis is legalized in a state, that there is a large uptick in the number of individuals consuming cannabis. And that is a completely false narrative. We know from empirical studies that in states and municipalities that have legalized cannabis, that there has been little to no uptick in the number of individuals consuming cannabis. The folks consuming cannabis post-legalization will be largely, if not all, the folks who are currently consuming cannabis pre-legalization. Thank you.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Open dialogue with the sponsor.
Go ahead.
Hey, Representative Zinsky, thanks for your thoughtfulness with the bill. I'm on many different subcommittees of committees, and you've made your rounds and spoken to a lot of groups, so I know you've worked really hard on this. And most of my questions don't directly have to do with the marijuana side of it, more some of the nuances on the policy itself. First, when it comes to like lines 507 to 536 on kind of the decision-making process, the only thing I'll mention, I'd love to talk with you more offline, and that's my fault that we haven't been able to this point, but really love to see more of the job creation data, more of the business plan, economic development type of data, economic impact type information when making those decisions on licenses, only because we want to know, if they are going to be able to do business and their quality of doing business, kind of like we do when we, give companies grants like Amazon and others. So I'd love to see that. I do have similar concerns that Representative Shute mentioned on the PLA requirement because of the word "must" in there. So I'd hate to see your bill not meet constitutional muster because of that one criteria. So hopefully that's something we can discuss later. In terms of the licenses themselves, I kind of think if any number you pick on what they're going to be is kind of arbitrary when it comes to it and trying to eliminate the black market. If you're really going to try to eliminate the black market, I understand why you choose different numbers for growers and manufacturers and all of that good stuff. But if you truly opened it up, that would actually help the medical cannabis market as well as the recreational cannabis market if we didn't limit licensure. So just a thought, I know that's probably not something that will end up working its way out of the bill, but I just wanted to bring that up in terms of, actually taking people in and out of the market, because the way it's currently written, it kind of makes it almost seem like, the license may be based off who you are, where you are, and who you're going to hire, without the ability to do business or the ability to serve a specific market that's, based off quality and price. And I'd hate to see, which, when it comes to the number of licenses, that's how the black market can still thrive, because you can still price people out of the market and go into the black market based off the economics of the number of licenses. So there's that. When it comes to the employee policies, starting at line 205, if you really want a true zero tolerance policy, I think you have to remove the words "at work," and I think you would absolutely get through that, and it would meet that requirement. Some of my colleagues mentioned some of the others, and so I appreciate your time. Look forward to catching up with you offline. I think this is a bill that we do need more public debate on, and something that I'll be supporting getting out of committee so that we can have that debate. I appreciate your work up to this point. No one's going to be happy about every facet of your bill when it's that many pages. To Representative Collins's point, I do understand the frustration of having a few days to kind of read it. We did know it was coming, and I know you've done your best to try to catch up with everyone on it. And I think it's just really some of the nuanced pieces of the bill itself and some of the criteria to argue about. I don't want to get into what the other representative mentioned, the Republican Democrat side of it. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to talk about policy. So I appreciate you sticking to those points and look forward to chatting with you about it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative. But if I could just point out one thing, the must is for the commissioner. That must, when it comes to, I think you pointed out the project labor agreement, that is not for the applicant. That must pertains to the commissioner, that he must include that as one of the many criterias for an applicant to address. That's it. So, thank you.
No, I understand, and thank you. Look forward to chatting with you about that offline.
All right, folks, I see no more hands up. That was very robust conversation. Appreciate it. Everybody came prepared today. With that, we will move on to the public comment portion.
If you'd like to provide public comment, please utilize the raise hand function or press *9 if calling in from a mobile device. Once again, utilize the raise hand function or press *9 from a phone. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Because of the large number of public comments, we'll be cutting off people at 2 minutes. If you'd like to submit written comment, please submit to housecommitteecomments@delaware.gov. William McVay, you've been permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I want to thank Representative Osinski for introducing this legislation. I want to thank the members of the committee for scheduling it for hearing promptly. I have already submitted a resolution passed by the Libertarian Party of Delaware State Board in support of HB150. I would like to use my time instead to address some of the issues raised by Representative Collins. in particular regarding the alleged association between psychosis and cannabis use. While there may be an association, I'm not familiar with the research that he was citing there. He did not even claim in his that it was a causal relationship, that using cannabis caused the psychosis. Instead, it could much more likely be the other way around, that people who have mental health issues are going to be far more likely to be self-medicating using cannabis than the general population. Also, in regards to the costs associated in the legal versus illegal markets, the illegal market is not without its costs either, although it doesn't have to pay licensing fees per se to the government. You could argue that there are licensing fees and there are taxes that are paid to the other parts of the cannabis market, except their drug gangs. There's also spillage, which in the legal market refers to product being damaged and product being stolen. In the illegal market, spillage is also product being stolen, but it's by, again, other gang members and other criminals, as well as law enforcement. I'm not comparing them to criminals, but they are also confiscating this product, which creates a risk factor that needs to be priced into the illegal market. It also creates an artificial scarcity that increases the prices of the product that will not be confronted by the legal markets. They will have proper mechanisms for enforcement of contracts, going to courts and whatnot, rather than going to a gun, and that will be a marked improvement over the situation in society, in that we don't have that associated gang violence with the illegal market. But it will also reduce the prices of the legal market as compared to the illegal market. And while I am not, as a libertarian, a fan of the taxes and regulations and licensing fees, I have every reason to assume that they will be able to be competitive with the black market, because they will not have that uncertainty, that risk, that artificial scarcity, and the other negative externalities that are associated with the illegal market. As I said, I've emailed the resolution passed by the...
Thank you, Mr. McVay. Your 2 minutes are
so
up.
please read all that. Thank you.
Alana Mosick, you have 2 minutes. You're permitted to speak.
Good afternoon. My name is Alana Mosick. I'm the policy lead for the Division of Public Health. Thank you to Chairman Bentz, Vice Chairwoman Minor Brown, and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Division of Public Health regarding HB150. DPH would like to bring a few areas of concern with HB150 to the committee. First, according to evidence review conducted by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, there's moderate evidence of a statistical association between cannabis use and the development of substance dependence and or substance use disorder for substances including alcohol, tobacco, and illicit drugs. As the Oversight Committee, which will include DPH and the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, monitors public safety, it would be helpful to have language in the bill that supports Delaware's behavioral health system as a possible use of the tax revenue collected, given the potential for behavioral health impacts as a result of legalization. Additionally, HB150 establishes a low licensure fee for recreational marijuana establishments as compared with that of compassion centers in Delaware's medical marijuana program. DPH recommends raising the fee from $10,000 in the bill to $20,000 to $30,000 every 2 years to be more closely in line with the Compassion Center requirements of $40,000 every 2 years. Otherwise, DPH is concerned that this wide cost difference will result in a shift from medical marijuana production to recreational due to the low fee structure. There's a difference in oversight and regulation due to the vulnerable nature of the medical marijuana patients, and DPH wants to ensure that patients have continued access to extensively tested marijuana products, regardless of the availability of recreational marijuana. Additionally, DPH recommends removing references to outdoor cultivation, as it puts marijuana plants and product at risk of contamination from insects, wildlife, pesticides, cross-pollination, and other contaminants. Delaware's Compassion Centers currently grow their marijuana exclusively indoors, which allows centers to closely control the growing environment, which includes temperature and light. Additionally, this is a greater security risk for marijuana to be grown outdoors, as evidenced by the Delaware Department of Agriculture's experiences with outdoor hemp cultivation. Thank you so much for your time. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Nico Brady, you are permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair, as well as committee members for your time to speak today. My name is Nico Brady. I am the Deputy Principal Assistant at the Delaware Department of Agriculture. The department wants to ensure that the proposed legislation more clearly contemplates how specific items established under existing rules and regulations will be addressed. Particularly, I will highlight technical concerns that we have related to agricultural aspects. Relating to the definition in the proposed bill, the department currently regulates the production of hemp in Delaware. The proposed definition, where marijuana means all parts or plant parts of cannabis sativa L, would imply that hemp is marijuana, and further implies that state would have regulatory authority over hemp. We would urge that the definition more clearly distinguish hemp from marijuana, where the Department of Agriculture currently regulates hemp. And using Title III, Chapter 28, where the definition of industrial hemp is clearly defined, particularly related to the 0.3 THC levels. Relating to the cultivation of marijuana, while the proposed bill does not provide details about how it will be cultivated, the department does urge that marijuana should be grown in indoor cultivation facilities with adequate security measures in place. In the past, outdoor growing sites outdoor growing sites where licensed Delaware hemp producers have experienced violent threats and theft of crops, where individuals have mistaken the crop for marijuana. So, we have seen this in the past year with hemp producers, and this is a reasonable concern. Related to existing rules and regulations, we just urge that currently items related to nursery stock, seed, pesticide use, and weights and measures in the state of Delaware do have both state and federal rules and regulations and state and federal laws that we do regulate here at the department. So we just urge that those things be better contemplated in the bill. We plan to also submit comments with more detail in written form. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Elisa Miller, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, Chairman Bentz and honorable members of the House Health and Human Development Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm Dr. Alyssa Miller, and I'm the director of our palliative care program at Nemours A. DuPont Hospital for Children. Our focus today is safety for children and youth in the event that Delaware moves forward with recreational marijuana. Our first concern is marketing to children and youth. HB150 delegates marketing restrictions to regulation. However, this issue is as consequential as packaging, and strict guidelines should be codified. We learned in the late 1990s that tobacco companies had cleverly and intentionally marketed to children. It was already too late by then. Countless youth had taken up smoking. Delaware should not allow the equivalent of Joe Camel to emerge in the state's marijuana market, and should therefore ban the following things: custom promotional products, such as caps and t-shirts, characters that appeal to youth, television, radio, and unsolicited internet marketing, outdoor signage such as billboards, celebrity endorsements, marketing within 1,000 feet of any venue that attracts children and families, wrapped vehicles, and ads on public transit. Companies will use websites to promote their products. However, online sales should be prohibited. We also urge you to strengthen the safety provisions in the legislation and ensure that packaging can be resealed, that there are clear warnings to pregnant women as well as parents, that the packages with multiple servings be labeled as such. There are more detailed recommendations we will provide during the regulatory process. Finally, we note that despite the best intentions and statutory prohibitions, it is likely that youth consumption of marijuana will increase following legislation, as it has in other states that have taken this step. We recommend that the General Assembly mitigate this outcome by funding evidence-based prevention programs with a portion of the tax revenue from marijuana. Delaware has a proud history of prioritizing child well-being when enacting public policy. We urge you to honor that history and add additional protections for children to HB 150. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ann Bookout, you have 2 minutes. You're permitted to speak.
And I am a member of Delaware United Policy Committee, and I'm here to speak on behalf of House Bill 150. For the past decade, an increasing number of states have made marijuana legal, which has been mentioned, for medical or recreational purposes, and the results are clear. Not only is legalization of marijuana perfectly safe, but it is incredibly profitable for states to do so, as the Colorado bill has been referenced previously. Moreover, marijuana legalization is proving to be a policy which is very popular with citizens of Delaware. A poll conducted last year by the University of Delaware showed that 56% of the total population is in favor, with almost 70% of those under the age of 30 in full support of legislation. In 2001, Delaware began the journey down this path when Governor Markell legalized the marijuana for medicinal purposes. And in 2021, it's finally time for us to complete this journey. We ask that you please release this bill from committee today and support it when it comes up for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. David Nathan, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Bentz and honorable members of the House Health and Human Development Committee. I speak to you today as the founder and board president of Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, or DFCR. DFCR is the nation's voice for physicians dedicated to the legalization, taxation, and, above all, the effective regulation of cannabis in the United States for adults. DFCR has hundreds of respected physician members in nearly every U.S. state and territory. As physicians, we believe that cannabis should never have been made illegal for consenting adults. It is less harmful to adults than alcohol and tobacco, and the prohibition has done far more damage to our society than the adult use of cannabis itself. Many capable advocates will speak to the harms of cannabis prohibition, especially to Black and Brown communities, so I will focus on issues of public health. Now, let me be clear. As a physician who follows the evidence wherever it takes me, I believe that cannabis can have negative health effects for at-risk populations. However, the negative health claims cited by some of the speakers today were factually incorrect and directly contradicted by available evidence. They come straight from the talking points of a well-funded opposition that cherry picks and distorts evidence to fit their ideology. But despite the hyperbole of the opposition, we must recognize that cannabis can do harm. The fact is that cannabis can be harmful to pregnant or breastfeeding women and people living with psychiatric disorders, and all legalized cannabis should carry warnings stating so. Also, cannabis, alcohol, and other drugs may adversely affect brain development in minors. But cannabis prohibition for adults has never prevented underage use nor limited its availability. The government's own statistics show that 80 to 90% of 18-year-olds consistently reported easy access to the drug from the 1970s until recently. In the past few years, as more states legalized cannabis for adults, points of access have reduced. The rate of underage cannabis access is now trending downward, and it is currently below 80% for the first time in decades. Some have argued that if cannabis
Thank you, Dr. Nathan. Your 2 minutes are up.
Oh, thank you.
Javon Rich, you've been permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, Chairperson Bentz, Vice Chairperson Minor Brown, who has stepped off, and committee members. My name is Javon Rich, and I'm a policy advocate at the ACLU of Delaware. The ACLU of Delaware supports HB150 and urges committee members to release this bill from committee. A significant portion of marijuana arrests in Delaware is for possession only with no link to violence. Equally troubling, according to a 2020 ACLU research report, Black Delawareans are over 4 times more likely than white people to be arrested for marijuana possession, even though Black and white people use marijuana at a similar rate. Delaware ranks 15th in the nation for the largest racial disparity in arrests for marijuana possession. Marijuana legalization is very much so a racial justice issue. Prohibition has been used as a means of surveillance and social control, and people in Black and Brown communities have routinely been stopped, searched, and sent to jail for engaging in activities that white people participate in without similar consequences. However, legalization alone cannot eliminate racial profiling, bias, and disparities. Recommendations to strengthen the bill would be to 1, intentionally and continuously collect data and study the disparate impact of marijuana regulation and arrests on Black and Brown communities and work towards solutions to eliminate disparities. So one of the whereas clauses did mention the disparities of arrests of Black Delawareans. However, Black was only mentioned one time in the bill, and there was no other mention of how they would repair those disparities. The law should also not replace marijuana prohibition with a system of fines, fees, and civil citations. Furthermore, the law should expand expungement opportunities for those with low-level trafficking convictions and those with eligible expungement convictions, regardless if they have other convictions for violent felonies on their record. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Stephen Lex, you have been permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, committee members. My name's Steve Lex, Vice President, Petnara Construction. I appreciate the opportunity to express our concerns regarding HB150, the Delaware Marijuana Control Act. Today, I'm also speaking on behalf of Reno and Greg Petnaro, who are unable to attend on this call. I have 2 comments. Before I start with my written testimony, on page 19 of 49, Representative Osinski, you just mentioned that the criteria for the competitive scoring process was a requirement for the commissioner. However, the way it's written, it says the applicant submission, or I'm sorry, it says item 4, it says the criteria for the competitive scoring process for open license types must include the following: and the applicant submission of an attestation that's signed by a bona fide labor organization, and then also the application submission for attestation affirming that the applicant has a project labor agreement. That's a mandate. Anyway, my 2 comments. So we're very concerned with the specific language of HB 150 and how it ties labor peace agreements and project labor agreements to private funded companies. And furthermore, where it mandates that PLAs be in place to construct new and or renovated existing facilities. We've been advised by our legal counsel that this legislation, as it is written, is unconstitutional and furthermore takes exception to the language that will limit our ability to acquire tenants for our properties as we renovate our existing buildings and or construct any of our new facilities in-house with our construction company. So it would be our request that this language and all the money that goes to that is paid by private money. So it would be our request for the language regarding labor peace agreements and the project labor agreements to be stricken from the language of this bill. On a second issue that we have, you had mentioned earlier also, and I understand that we're a zero tolerance policy, and that we are an outright, to fire, but we're opposed with legalizing marijuana.
Thank you, Mr. Lex. Your 2 minutes are up.
Okay.
Zoe Patchell, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Chairman Benson, members of the House Health and Human Development Committee. My name is Zoe Patchell, and I'm the Executive Director and Co-founder of Delaware Cannabis Advocacy Network. We ask that you please vote yes on HB 150. Cannabis legalization has reached the tipping point. 14 states, including our neighbors New Jersey, have now legalized adult use cannabis, and 19 other states, including all the mid-Atlantic states, are taking substantial steps to eliminate civil and criminal penalties for cannabis and convert their pre-existing cannabis markets into economic development and generating and job-creating cannabis industries that will go a long way to aid in the pandemic recovery. Delaware doesn't exist in a bubble, and it's just impractical, illogical, and fiscally irresponsible to think, especially at this point, that cannabis prohibition will ever eliminate cannabis from Delaware or stop people from consuming it. Therefore, the only responsible decision to make is to legalize cannabis for adults 21 and older and pass this common sense measure that employs robust measures to prevent underage sales, as well as rigorous consumer safety protections to ensure that the products that are sold here in Delaware are safe, none of which can be done with the illicit market. The arguments repeated by opponents of legalization are often overstated, misleading, or hinged on the false premise that no one is currently consuming cannabis and that legalization creates something new that doesn't already exist. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, Delaware has a rather large pre-existing consumer base with 18.5% or approximately 145 Delaware adults admitting to consuming cannabis. If the problems opponents claim actually existed, we would already see them occurring in our state. New York State Department of Health released a comprehensive report that concluded the positive effects of a regulated market in New York State outweigh the potential negative impacts. Areas that may be cause for concern can be mitigated with regulation and proper use of public education that is tailored to address key population. The idea that there's somehow an increased illicit market is absurd and illogical. Cannabis legalization has taken billions of dollars of revenue out of the hands of the criminal market. To suggest that the cannabis market is somehow larger than this and to advocate to keep this huge lucrative market in the hands of the illicit market is irresponsible, willfully ignorant, and a huge public safety issue. A no vote on HB 150 will not make cannabis.
Thank you, Ms. Petchel. Your 2 minutes are up.
Yep.
Jamie Johnston, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the members and the chairs of the committee for my time. My name is Jamie Johnson, and I'm a Deputy Principal Assistant with the Department of Finance. HB 150 presents a number of noteworthy administrative and technical issues related to tax collections and administration. First, it's unclear why the Marijuana Commissioner is collecting tax and reporting taxes to the Division of Revenue. It would be more efficient if one agency were responsible for collecting, recording, and audit of this revenue stream, similar to the role of Division of Revenue with alcohol taxes. Second, the tax established in HB 150 is designed as a retail sales tax applicable to marijuana products. The bill must clarify that such retailers are responsible for gross receipts taxes on products that do not contain marijuana. The legislation must also clarify whether non-retail marijuana businesses are subject to the state's gross receipts tax. For the foreseeable future, we can expect that all of these businesses may be largely cash-based. Unfortunately, this creates increased collection concerns. Requiring that each sale of marijuana or non-marijuana product be recorded, tracked, and available to tax authorities electronically will help mitigate these risks. Third, HB 150 implements a quarterly tax reporting structure. Given the substantial amount of money being collected, lags in collection timeframes create payment risk, opportunities for fraud, and heightened risk of violent crime and/or theft. Monthly reporting process similar to alcohol would help mitigate these risks. Fourth, marijuana is still federally designated as a Class 1 drug. Due to federal banking and anti-money laundering laws, most banks remain unwilling to accept deposits for marijuana sales. If the state is unable to deposit tax proceeds with its existing banks, the treasurer will need to establish banking relationships with a financial institution willing to accept such deposits. Alternatively, a state agency would be forced to act as a bank for such funds, investing in vaults and personnel to assist in safekeeping. While it is unclear whether such activity might be deemed a violation of federal laws, we would strongly recommend language in the law indemnifying and/or committing to defend any state employee involved in the regulation, administration, or enforcement of the statute. Fifth, the Marijuana Regulation Fund is created within the Department of Finance and should instead be held with the Office of the State Treasurer as is common. Sixth, pursuant to Article 8, subsection 4 of the Constitution, loans or grants to businesses as established in lines 809 and 810 of this Act are constitutionally required to have a 3/4 vote. This would be similar to other grants and loans, and amounts in the fund would likely need to be included in the capital budget or in the grant and aid process. And finally, it may be advisable to review, restrict, or further set parameters regarding the Marijuana Commissioner's authority to issue grants or loans of low interest to social equity licensees, as is done with other such grants and loans. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. John Seibert, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Bentz and members of the House Health and Human Development Committee. My name is John Seibert. I live in Ocean View, and I'm Vice President of the Delaware Cannabis Advocacy Network. I ask you to please vote yes to HB 150 advancing through this committee. The legal cannabis industry has reached the mainstream. It is no longer considered controversial. This is evidenced by New Jersey's new industry and Virginia being close to repealing its prohibition laws. HB 150 will position Delaware to be competitive in the Mid-Atlantic region by being at the genesis. With an already existing market, millions of dollars of revenue would shift from the illicit market to a well-crafted, nation-leading industry. The law would create thousands of industry jobs, as well as jobs in secondary industries such as construction, electrical, HVAC, accounting, legal, manufacturing, security, tech, agricultural, real estate, and tourism. The timing couldn't be any better for COVID-19 relief. In addition, across Sussex County, many young people are facing the decision whether they should enter the family farming business. With the cannabis industry, we can create jobs for those farms and ensure farmland stays generational in the rural areas of the state. I also believe that by implementing this economy, we are sending a message to the youth that there will be a cannabis farming industry to inherit. We can show them that there is a lot of hope in a post-pandemic economy. Prohibition has been a failed and costly policy and does nothing to reduce the cannabis consumer. 14 states and Washington, D.C. have ended this failed policy. The majority of Delawareans agree that removing from the illicit market and creating a thriving, inventive,
cannabis industry is a better future. The real question is, who do you want to control this market, drug dealers or the citizens of Delaware? Thank you.
Thank you. Kisa Stuckey, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Aikisha Stuckey, and I serve on the Delaware United Policy Committee. We are here today to testify in favor of House Bill 150. The data is pretty clear on this issue. Decriminalization has failed to achieve the goals that many hoped would come to pass at this point. What started out as a movement to stop locking people up for simple cannabis charges has done just the opposite. Every single year since decriminalization, the number of charges for cannabis has gone up. Families are still being torn apart. Responsible adults are still being charged. And the cycle of criminality for the usage of cannibalism is still proceeding forward. The simple fact is that when individuals have stated in the past that cannibalism is a gateway drug, they were right. In states like Delaware, cannabis is one of the #1 gateway drugs into the criminal justice system. HB150 will help bring an end to the war on drugs in Delaware, but it will do so much more than that. Thanks to the careful drafting that has taken place and the wonderful collaboration with advocates from all sides on this matter, House Bill 150 will finally start to heal some of the decade-old scars that cannabis prohibition has left on our state's population. By focusing the economic opportunity and benefit on communities that have been most impacted, HB 150 will help to reserve the tide of racism that has plagued our justice system with regard to cannabis. We can take those with business sense and economic understanding of cannabis and help move them into a regulated and highly profitable industry. We can ensure that this does not become yet another example of a Black market industry turning white collar at the expense of the Black community for the benefit of wealthy white men. By ending the decriminalization of responsible cannabis usage and expunging the records of historically impacted individuals, we can help end the cycle of criminality and poverty. What's more, we can help rebuild families and communities that have been repeatedly torn apart by a failed policy born out of hate and ignorance. We ask that you please release this bill from the committee today and support it when it comes up for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stuckey. Mark Jacobs, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chairman Bentz and the committee members. I am speaking in favor of HB 150 and respectfully ask you to vote yes. My name is Mark Jacobs. I am a retired software engineer from Lewis. I am a cannabis consumer, and I would pay more for a legal regulated product. I ask one overriding question. What purpose is served by continuing cannabis prohibition? Since its inception in 1937, this policy has achieved none of its goals, zero. Neither consumption nor supply has lessened. That's 85 years of failure. Per a new SAMHSA study, 18.5% of adult Delawareans admit to using cannabis. That equates to nearly 150,000 of us, your friends, coworkers, family. Consider this. If you were in a group of 5 people, the odds are very good that one of them smokes pot. I ask you to listen to the electorate, which has already decided this matter and wants cannabis legalized. Its use is no longer controversial. A third of Americans live in a state where adults may legally purchase cannabis from thriving businesses. A Gallup poll finds 70% of Americans favor legalization. In 2018, a UD poll found that 61% of Delawareans are in favor of legalization. That number has only increased. If we are truly a government of, by, and for the people, you should vote for legalization. 14 states and the District of Columbia have ended the injustice of prohibition. Virginia is joining them. They prove that the fears of prohibitionists are completely unfounded. Please vote yes so Delaware can safely move forward, benefit from a large existing market, and end injustice. I thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Healy, you've been to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, wait, I can't hear. My name is Lisa Healy. I am a cannabis medical card holder. I have been a card holder for 3 years now. I am in favor of HB 150, and I would first like to thank Representative Osinski for being very dominant in this area and taking us to where it's at now. I just am here to be the voice of the executive people in the world. It has a bad connotation on it, marijuana does, that you think that it's the person in the street doing it. I am here to tell you that I got my card 3 years ago. I was I did not like cannabis. I was against it, and I probably would have voted against it about 4 years ago. However, upon becoming medically able to purchase it, I have had to do my research. I know probably more than the person that is giving it to me across the counter at the dispensary. My biggest thing about wanting it legal is to have a more diverse product out there. I use them for migraines. I was just hospitalized this past weekend and was given morphine for the pain. That created a migraine. I don't get any sort of side effects from my cannabis. If you research it, and the people that are against it are my representatives that are against it, if you could please research it, ask your people in the area or in your constituents that do use it, you will find that it is safer than any other drug out there, which I disagree with it being classified as a tier 1 drug. My father is a retired state police officer. He is for legalizing cannabis. He also has his hand up right now, and he'll talk to you later about that. I just wanted to also, Representative Collins was talking about the black market and how he believes that the black market would grow. I know a lot of people that go to the black market.
Thank you, Ms. Healy.
They can't get a medical card, but they would be willing to go into a dispensary and pay more because they know that it is a safe product. It is very
Thank you, Ms. Healy. Your 2 minutes are up.
For us medical.
Thank you, Ms. Healy. Your 2 minutes are up, but you can submit your comments to House Committee Comment at delaware.gov. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sharice Ward, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes. Ms. Ward, make sure to unmute.
Good afternoon, Chairman Bentz, Vice Chair Minor Brown, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Sharice Ward, and I'm a resident of Delaware and the Retail Director for Columbia Care Delaware. Given my position, I have firsthand experience on how this product can change lives for the better, especially through our Adopt a Family program. Having spent nearly 3 years in this capacity, I have witnessed the Delaware medical marijuana program go from its infancy to the maturing model of today that serves nearly 10,000 patients. Serving these patients has been a great honor for me in my professional career. I fear the introduction of this legislation will undercut the very program that these patients rely on for their health and wellness needs. HB 150 would deal a crushing blow to Delaware's medical marijuana program if enacted as proposed. Multiple factors such as cost, administrative burden for cardholders, as well as the potential for oversupply will turn Delaware's focus to the rapid increase of adult use only clientele. This will have obvious negative impacts on nearly the 10,000 patients that put their trust in the medical program and experienced operators to serve their health and wellness needs. Additionally, this legislation as proposed would increase cultivation capacity by nearly 650%. Have there ever been market studies conducted by the legislator that suggest that this is an appropriate amount? I make it my business to understand the dynamics of Delaware, both demographically and geographically, and this speaks to the effort intended or unintended that will saturate the market, similar to a state like Oregon. Oregon in 2016 had over 400 medical dispensaries, and today only one is in existence. How will the state guarantee medical products for our cancer and pediatric patients once the recreational market is established? Furthermore, what assurance does the legislation provide that adult use operators will commit to the same regulatory oversight and control measures that we as medical operators have had to commit to? Lastly, how would the state guarantee the speed to market necessary to facilitate recreational program that meets anticipated revenue goals as well as combat the illicit market? The answer is plain and simple.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Your 2 minutes are up.
Thank you.
Ann Farley, you've been to speak. You have 2 minutes. Ms. Farley, make sure to unmute.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good afternoon, Chair Bentz, members of the committee, Representative Osinski, Ann Farley on behalf of Delmarva Power and Light. We are concerned with the employer accommodations that have been discussed as part of the recreational marijuana proposal in HB 150. As an electric utility critical to the public health, safety, and welfare, we have a drug and alcohol policy that ensures a workplace and workforce free of the adverse effects of drugs and alcohol, and ensures compliance with federal laws. In addition to the highly sensitive work that many of our employees engage in, from poll workers to truck and machinery operators, most of our employees are trained for second roles, providing backup in case of unforeseen incidents, including storm duty, many of which involve dangerous work. We have a zero tolerance policy for impairment from drugs and alcohol while on duty. While we have no intention of intruding on employees' private lives, we also recognize that off-the-job drug and alcohol use can adversely impact job performance and employee safety. We therefore require drug and alcohol testing of certain employees, in particular those subject to state and federal requirements, employees suspected of being under the influence while on duty, and employees involved in accidents. We therefore request any legislation permitting recreational use allow employers to make the best decisions for the safety of their employees and the public when it comes to determining drug and alcohol policies. Employers are best suited to determine what policies are needed for their unique workplace. We provided written testimony requesting a friendly amendment that explicitly clarifies a zero tolerance policy for the protection of our workers and the public we serve. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you. David White, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes. Mr. White?
Yes, sir. Chairman Bentz, Vice Chair Minor Brown, Representative Osinski, members of the committee, community leaders, and fellow stakeholders, good afternoon. My name is David M. White. I have the pleasure to serve as Chief Legal Officer for Fresh Delaware, the first state's Newark-based registered compassion center. Prior to my tenure with Fresh, I was a Human Resources and Labor Relations Executive with United Parcel Service of America. Immediately prior to entering the regulated cannabis industry, I served on the faculty and as director of the Seton Hall University School of Law and was a visiting professor at the Georgetown University Law Center. I come before the committee as a concerned business leader. In my 2 minutes, I will raise 3 focus points to inform your deliberation on a matter of crucial importance to Delawareans. First, the proposed bill would visit violence upon the economic well-being of those who have chosen to make a material stake in this state. Fresh has undertaken a multi-million-dollar expansion of its Newcastle cultivation facility, as well as expanding product offerings by launching an extracts manufacturing operation and lab. Increasing the number of cultivation sites at this time, even from 6 to 10, let alone 60, would render our carefully considered long-term vision a non-recoupable loss and would cause us to lay off our unionized workers. Indeed, we are planning to issue a reduction in force notice this week if this bill should advance. Second, this draft legislation would exacerbate an existing oversupply of product. Based on the square footage of canopy under construction in Delaware, there is already expected to be a glut of excess inventory which cannot be sold. Increasing the number of cannabis cultivation facilities at this nascent phase of cultural change is simply too much too soon. It would force the existing facilities either to shutter their doors or to downsize. This would be inconsistent with the first state's business-friendly history. Lastly, like tobacco and alcohol, cannabis usage is a vice. We deeply admire Representative Osinski's intent and his forward-thinking legislation. Ending prohibition will move the commerce from an illegal market to a taxed, lab-tested, pesticide-free regulated market and will remedy the social ills of the failed drug war. Thank you for your consideration of this insight.
Thank you. Joseph Jerkowski, you have 2 minutes to speak. Mr. Drakowski.
Chairman Bentz, Vice Chairman Minor Brown, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Joseph Drakowski, and I'm a combat veteran and medical marijuana patient. Since my time in the United States Army, I've suffered from combat PTSD, which was not well treated through conventional medical management plan. Because of medical cannabis, I was able to get my life back and get off the opiate and benzo cocktail that the VA was serving me. Pardon me. Why am I mute? I apologize. I'm having technical difficulties.
We can hear you just fine, Mr. Drakowski.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I don't have glasses and I need them. Many veterans, though, are not well served through the medical cannabis program because of concerns that being on a list, a government list, that could put our VA benefits at risk. My fellow veterans need access to the same products I'm able to get through medical programs through legalization. As a matter of fact, I think the legislation should directly address some critical medical research issues, maybe even partnership with the VA. I've heard many people in this hearing testify, speak, and the importance of protecting the medical program and legalization. I could not agree more. Ultimately, I trust in the product and the clinical experience of my current MMCC. And if any dispensary isn't able to serve adult use consumers like my fellow veterans seeking relief, it would be a shame. With gratitude, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Drakowski. Jeffrey Horvath, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Yes, thank you. Members of the committee, my name is Jeff Horvath. I'm the Executive Director of the Delaware Police Chiefs Council. I'll be brief. The bottom line for us, this comes down to public safety. The passing of HB 150 does nothing to improve public safety in the state of Delaware. In fact, it diminishes public safety in the state of Delaware. We only have to look to other states that have legalized recreational marijuana to see that we can expect an increase in serious and fatal collisions due to an increase in drug driving. Currently, with the technology available, this is the type of drug driving that is difficult to investigate and prosecute. We can also expect to see an increase in ER visits and an increase in the use of marijuana by adolescents between the ages of 12 and 17. The promise of the black market disappearing has not happened in Colorado. In fact, the black market is flourishing. And they have a new market called the gray market, where the marijuana is legally grown and then illegally sold when they have too much of it. It's for this reason, simply, as I stated, due to the lack of the diminishment of public safety, that the Delaware Police Chiefs Council is asking you to vote no on House Bill 150. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew Burde, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Bentz and members of the committee. I'm Dr. Matt Burde. I'm the president of the Medical Society of Delaware. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today regarding House Bill 150, and the Medical Society thanks Representative Osensky for sponsoring the bill. As you know, both recreational and medical marijuana are being used by more and more members of the population than ever. Marijuana is the most commonly used illegal substance in the U.S., and its use is growing. Marijuana is legalized in 8 states for recreational use and 25 states for medicinal use. While many patients of various ages claim to benefit from the purported health effects of marijuana, there's still much that is unknown. And I want to present some of the data that's clear about some of the adverse problems associated with the drug. In a recent survey, approximately 10% of adults in the U.S. older than 18 years of age reported using marijuana once a month. A recent national survey on drug use and health reveals that marijuana smoking is on the rise compared with tobacco smoking. There's also recent data that suggests that 30% of those who use marijuana may have some degree of marijuana use disorder, and that's defined as problem use, which may lead to dependence. Of note, people who begin using marijuana before the age of 18 are 4 to 7 times more likely to develop marijuana use disorder than adults. Studies show that about 1 in 10 who use marijuana will become addicted, and when they start before the age of 18, the rate of addiction rises to 1 in 6. And as I noted previously, marijuana use among all adult age groups, both sexes, and pregnant women is going up. At the same time, the perception of how harmful marijuana use can be is declining. Increasingly, young people today don't consider marijuana use a risky behavior. And also of note is the fact that marijuana is a much more potent drug today than in the past. For example, in the early 1990s, the average THC component, that is marijuana's psychoactive component, in confiscated marijuana samples was less than 4%. In 2018, it was more than 15%. The increasing potency of marijuana raises concerns that the consequences of use today could be worse than in the past, especially among those.
Thank you, Mr. Bay. Your 2 minutes are up.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Ken Grant, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chairman Bentz and Vice Chair Minor Brown. I'm Ken Grant. I am the Public and Government Affairs Manager for AAA Mid-Atlantic. AAA, of course, strongly opposes the legalization of recreational cannabis simply because of the inherent traffic safety risks and because of the difficulties in determining impairment at the roadside by law enforcement. Fatal crashes involving drivers who recently used cannabis doubled in Washington state after legalization, according to research by the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety. Crash rates and insurance claims also increased in Colorado, Nevada, and Oregon after recreational legalization passed. Data from the Colorado Division of Criminal Justice shows the number of fatalities with cannabinoid only or cannabinoid in combination with other drugs and alcohol positive drivers increased 153% from 55 in 2013 to 139 in 2017. AAA believes that people who drive while impaired by cannabis should face the same penalties established for drunken drivers. Unfortunately, unlike for alcohol, knowing how much active THC is in the body fluids of a driver does not reliably predict that driver's level of impairment. This means that even perfectly accurate technology to measure the amount of active THC in blood or saliva proves nothing more than recent use of cannabis. It's not the lack of a test that complicates this situation, it's that researchers have not successfully established how the result of such a test relates to driver impairment. Conversely, this is well established for alcohol. AAA, as an advocate for safety and motorists of all roadway users, is troubled by the safety implications of individuals using cannabis and getting behind the wheel. It's dangerous to legalize cannabis before we are prepared to manage this potential roadway safety consequence and provide law enforcement officers with all the training and resources they need to address this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nandi Randolph, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Nandi Randolph, and I'm an African-American voter in Representative Longhurst District that holds degrees in both biological science and education. As I make comment on HB150 today, I would first like to point the committee's attention to HB115, which passed its Judiciary Committee hearing just this past week. HB115 was sponsored by Representative Chukwuocha and co-sponsored by some of the members of this very committee and was related to juvenile prosecution. In the language of the bill, it pointed to the mounds of scientific research that find that the development of adolescent brains is incomplete until they reach their mid-20s, 25 years being an often agreed to number. HB 150 mimics current alcohol legalization practices in that it would make the age of legal usage 21. The body does not filter or process marijuana and alcohol the same, however, and thus should not be legislated the same. Whereas alcohol is filtered through the liver, marijuana is extremely fat soluble, meaning that it is easily absorbed by fatty tissues, and the largest fatty organ of the body is the brain. The direct effects of marijuana will be to the brain. I urge the committee to please consider the point of agreement from the recently passed HB 115 and the lack of full brain development prior to the mid-20s and stop HB 150 from legalizing usage at an age where brains are still vulnerable to potential damage from marijuana usage. I will submit further comments with sources of research from the American Medical Association, the Lancet, and even the Colorado Task Force that was put together to research its implementation to all the members of the General Assembly, and hope that you will take into consideration the scientific sources and protect the adolescent brains of Delaware. Please vote against HB 150. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Bentz, do you have an announcement?
Yes, very quickly. Everybody who has their hand up now will be permitted to speak, but we're going to have to, for staffing reasons and legislators having other meetings, wrap this up by 2:30. So we're going to get through the speakers that have their hands up, 28 remaining, and then we will go back to the committee for any decision on the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Scherer, you have permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Bentz and members of the committee. My name is Laura Scherer. I live in Wilmington. I am the Executive Director of Delaware NORML and a proud advocate for our local cannabis community. I ask you to please support House Bill 150. Adult use cannabis legalization is a matter of justice. Cannabis prohibition is a failed, costly policy that diverts law enforcement resources away from serious crime and puts unnecessary strain on our criminal justice system. In addition to the monetary cost associated with enforcement, cannabis prohibition comes at an unjustifiable human cost. According to Delaware Statistical Analysis Center, in 2018, over 5,900 Delawareans had a police encounter for possession-only cannabis offenses, with an appalling equality along racial lines. As mentioned by the ACLU, in Delaware, Black people are 4 times more likely to be arrested for cannabis offense than white, which is slightly higher than the national average. Racial disparity in arrests increased between 2010 and 2018, despite our state decriminalizing cannabis in 2015. Passage of this legislation, HB 150, will protect over 145,000 adult cannabis consumers in Delaware from arrest, civil citation, seizure of property and currency, and threat, stigma, and lifelong consequences of being subjected to the criminal justice system. The ongoing enforcement of cannabis prohibition financially burdens taxpayers, encroaches upon civil liberties, engenders disrespect for the law, and disproportionately impacts our communities of color. It's time for Delaware to become a leader in sensible cannabis policy and end this failed prohibition that continues to exist as a tool to perpetuate systematic racism by targeting and devastating already marginalized communities in our state. For these reasons, I strongly urge you to support House Bill 150, both today and when it comes before you in the full House chamber. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lizzie Golob, you've been permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hello. Good afternoon, Chairman Bentz and members of the House Committee. My name is Lizzie Golob. I live in Millsboro, and I am a wife of 17 years, a mom to 3 children, and a co-business owner of Lit by the Sea, a new gift shop in Laurel. I am also the volunteer recruiter for Delaware Cannabis Advocacy Network and the secretary for Delaware NORML Incorporated. I ask that you please vote yes on HB 150. There are numerous reasons why cannabis prohibition should end. This life-changing plant that I consume has killed no one. If we can have multitudes of liquor stores that regulate alcohol, we should have the choice of consuming cannabis. I am an adult and have chosen to use cannabis and stop using the life-damaging medications I was on 5 years ago. We still face an opiate epidemic in our country today, and it saddens me to think I was part of it. People need the right to choose this non-toxic plant over pills, such as morphine and muscle relaxers. Research from Delaware University says that 61% of Delawareans are for legalization of cannabis. Passing of HB 150 will be very beneficial for our current medical patients, myself included. With only 3 companies at this time to service over 10,000 patients, passing a recreational bill would allow patients to have more access to cannabis products. We saw at the start of COVID a decrease in the supply that all 3 dispensaries were offering. This caused many patients to go without their particular cannabis products. Providing access to safe, well-tested, and quality-controlled cannabis for its patients should be of the utmost importance for the state. Giving patients the ability to go to recreational dispensaries would only increase the revenue that the state would bring in. One of the main reasons you should vote yes on HB 150 is the revenue it will bring to the first state. With surrounding states having already legalized, Delaware needs to pass this legalization measure. The growth and opportunities that this bill provides for minorities and small businesses will allow new people to gain employment in Delaware. Once again, I ask that you vote yes on HB 150. Please pass this measure as it comes forward to all committees. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Justin Curran, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Justin Curran. I'm 35. My family's in Seaford. My grandmother is Margaret Hastings. She was the first woman mayor of Glades, Delaware in 1947. Our family has been there since the 1920s. We are looking to hopefully apply if you guys pass this bill through. I've been in California's medical marijuana business for over 10 years. I've watched this industry bloom. I've lived in Arizona, Oklahoma, California, and in Delaware. All have some type of marijuana in their systems. Here in California, things aren't going well because over-regulation. I see that's what's going to happen in Delaware. And if you guys really want to get rid of the black market, you need to stop over-regulating it, open the licensing, allow more people that have been hurt by this industry to thrive in it. It doesn't seem right that only 16 licenses will go to affected people, but hopefully we get the chance to apply. And I'm just really here to see that you guys are going to push it through. I'm really hoping. I really want to get back to my family. I'm tired of living in California. I want to be with my family and my cousins, my aunts, and my uncles. And I'm kind of being held here because of your guys' laws. I'm on the hemp advisory committee in Delaware. I was there trying to set up my hemp farm last year when I was pulled over, searched, given a $125 fine for a cannabis pipe when I'm a medical marijuana patient. I can see the amount of damage that's happened in my communities there. My family has all been hurt by the cops there. Everybody from the cops to the DMV were uneducated or unaware of what was really going on, telling me I needed to ship my car back on a semi truck to, like, everything was just crazy in Delaware. You guys need to train the cops, train everybody who works there basically on what's going on, because nobody knows the laws. Nobody seems to know what's going on in Delaware, and we need to. Delaware shouldn't be the last when they're the first state. Slower, lower, Delaware needs to get ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Curran. Your 2 minutes are up. John Yeomans, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes. Mr. Yeomans.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is John Yeomans. I'm the Director of Alcohol and Tobacco Enforcement. There are a myriad of evolving policy and regulatory issues associated with legalizing and regulating cannabis. Often the first step for state and local jurisdictions weighing legalization is to seek out regulators from established markets and programs. The Division of Alcohol and Tobacco Enforcement is identified in House Bill 150 as the regulatory agency. As such, should this pass, become law, our mission as a regulatory agency is namely safeguarding public health and safety, specifically preventing the distribution to minors, drug driving, and other adverse public health consequences associated with cannabis use, protecting consumer health through product packaging, labeling, safety, and testing requirements, developing effective public health monitoring and education programs to promote responsible cannabis use and better understand changes in usage, prohibiting diversion from legal jurisdictions and stopping criminal enterprises and activities from operating within legal frameworks. Also understanding that we would adopt best practices and lessons learned from our counterparts around the country. One of the things we've also learned by way of research and discussions with our counterparts that have been tasked with this responsibility is that cannabis regulation requires 3.5 times the time and or resources that the regulation of alcohol does. As such, to move forward with this, if the law were to pass, we would be seeking additional staff, technological support, equipment, training, and additional office space to house that additional staffing so that we could be successful in our endeavor to regulate this for the reasons I stated earlier, and ensuring that it's a fair and equitable marketplace through fair trade practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne Smith, you're ready to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Benz, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts on behalf of the Delaware Healthcare Association with you today regarding House Bill 150. Delaware Healthcare Association is the trade group representing the state's hospitals. I won't take my entire 2 minutes, but just wanted to echo some of the health concerns related to legalization of marijuana. I think Ms. Nandi Randolph made a very eloquent statement we fully subscribe to in terms of the effects of this drug on the brain, and also the fact that this has not been a widely studied substance. It does bear more research. We also certainly fully subscribe to Nemours concerns regarding the very real potential that youth will find this very much more accessible the way the bill is currently construed, and would advocate for making sure that appropriate restrictions are put in that would limit the marketing and availability of this drug to young people. And finally, as the state's representing the state's largest private sector employers, as well as the state's largest employment industry that's non-agricultural, we do share a lot of the concerns that you've heard from chambers of commerce and large employers, as articulated today by Ms. Ann Farley on behalf of Delmarva Power and Life. We are concerned with some of the language is non-specific and leaves room for interpretation as to whether or not companies may enforce zero tolerance policies. I'm sure every member of the committee can appreciate that in our industry, where the safety of patients is first and foremost, the ability to make sure that our employees are unimpaired is critical. So we would ask that you certainly look at this view, or look at this legislation from that viewpoint. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Charles Stirk, you have permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Charles Stirk. I'm Vice President of the Civic League of Newcastle County. We had voted in 2015 for the legalization of marijuana in the state of Delaware. Specifically, what I wanted to address is Newcastle County Police Force's enforcement of marijuana. Since 2018, they've seen a year-on-year halving of the marijuana citations and arrest, or civil citations and arrest, and the world didn't end. Also, we've seen the AG's office choosing not to prosecute the majority of those cases. Again, the world didn't end. The other thing I just wanted to mention is, as far as driving under the influence, Newcastle County's police force had 2 in 2019 and 3 in 2020. You know, this is not a rampant problem, and that's down from a high of 6 in 2016. So as a member of the Civic League of Newcastle County, I'd strongly support it, SB 150. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Rose, you've been ready to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chairman, committee members. I'm hoping that you guys vote yes for HB 150. I represent By Any Means Medical, which is an educational company dealing with cannabis, THC, and hemp. I am a card carrier and a resident of Delaware. I've been a card carrier for 6 years. A few reasons why I'm all for HB 150. Medically, I've seen in my journey in life that it does help a lot of people. I've seen CBD being given to children with seizures. I've also seen cannabis improve the quality of life for elderly people or people who are on different medications. Also, when it comes to societal, I've been out the West Coast and I've seen communities, Representative Collins, I've seen communities and families rampant with cocaine, heroin, other types of drugs. Now we've got fentanyl running through the country. But I see families creating legacies, being able to plant a seed, create a brand, and then put something for their grandchildren's children. Mr. Collins, I know you can admit that somewhere in your family, someone's been touched by a heroin or cocaine addiction, or the ramifications of that. You don't see this with cannabis. And I hope that you guys go ahead and move forward with the vote. I hope there's full transparency with the Cannabis Committee and also the regulation. I hope that there's full transparency when you give out these licenses. There's a community, there's a part of the community that has.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Your 2 minutes are up.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
James DeShane, you've been permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chairwoman. My name is James DeShane, and I am here on behalf of the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce. I first want to thank the sponsor for having conversations with the Chamber leadership on this bill, and my comments are going to focus primarily on lines 205 to lines 218 of the legislation. You heard earlier from both Delmarva Power and from the Hospital Association with Mr. Smith. We're hoping for a little bit more clarification on the sponsor's statement that employers are allowed to have a zero tolerance policies on behalf of their employees. We feel the way that the bill is drafted currently does allow an employer to restrict the use of marijuana while at work, but it does nothing to prohibit any type of usage in off hours. You may be aware that there are employers in the state of Delaware that for health reasons prohibit the use of tobacco, regardless of if the employee is at work or during off hours. And we would like the same ability for employers to regulate the use of marijuana. In addition, we have some concerns about the disciplinary procedures under here. It looks like you have to have, as an employer, a baseline of behavior for every employee that you have on staff to be able to tell whether or not there's an impairment. And even with that, you can't really tell if somebody's sleepy or somebody's under the influence of marijuana or anything else for that matter. And so if an employer decides to discipline an employee based on the assumption of impairment, and that assumption is proven wrong, I think it opens up the ability for an employee to bring suit where the employer is just doing the best they can to regulate the use of marijuana in the workplace. We look forward to working with the sponsor. I hope that in the days ahead that we can address some of the ambiguity specific to the employment section. I would also like to echo some of the...
Thank you, Mr. DeShane. Your 2 minutes are up. Jennifer Stark, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Chairman Benz, Vice Chair Minor Brown, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Stark. I live in Harrington. I graduated from the University of Delaware, practiced as an environmental engineer, and I have started several women-owned companies in Delaware. This past year, with my brother, Bill Rohr, we've established a veteran-owned small business in Kent County called The Farm. We were fortunate to be awarded a medical marijuana license a few months ago. We have barely begun establishing our new small business to join the 3 current medical operators in Delaware. HB150 proposes 30 retail licenses, 30 manufacturing, and 60 cultivation licenses. Wow. Personally, I have struggled with chronic pain and recently received my medical card. I do not want to see HB150 do to me what it has done to others who you are trying to help. For example, Robin Beverett, a 47-year-old disabled Army veteran in California, said she was unable to afford medical marijuana to control her anxiety and PTSD when the cost nearly tripled after California began recreational sales. We don't want this to happen to our veterans in Delaware. Plainly stated, HB150 would just crush Delaware's medical program and our nearly 10,000 patients, many of whom are cancer and pediatric patients. If medical cannabis groups aren't included in the adult use, the medical program will fall apart. However, there is one solution or a possible solution. Look at CVS or Walgreens. They have a portion of their store for over-the-counter goods and then a pharmacy in the back. Delaware should follow the lead of other states like New Jersey and Massachusetts to embrace the medical marijuana program to ensure quality, consistency, and availability by awarding them licenses. Then Delaware can build on that backbone, allowing for additional micro businesses and social equity licenses, as suggested in HB 150, to give citizens of our state the best of both worlds. Again, as a Delawarean and a female small business owner in the medical cannabis space, I would appreciate the opportunity to work with the legislator to revise a bill that would protect and include the medical program. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. James Nolan, you've been permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. As a member of the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is James Nolan. I'm a professor and chair of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at West Virginia University. I'm here today to support HB 150. Having served as a lieutenant with the Wilmington Police Department, I support regulating marijuana from a public health perspective and removing it from the purview of the criminal justice system. Like most police, I've struggled over the prospect of marijuana legalization, largely because I don't want to send the wrong message that marijuana is harmless. However, my firsthand experience as a Wilmington police officer and my police research as a sociologist have taught me that marijuana prohibition causes more harm than the use of the drug. Our marijuana laws brew deep distrust of police and the criminal justice system. We must remember marijuana was made illegal in the first place, not due to public health, but to establish control over Black and brown communities. The leaders behind the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act called for marijuana prohibition because it was a drug associated with Mexicans. And President Nixon created the Schaefer Commission to study marijuana and then criminalized marijuana use against the commission's recommendation. According to top aide John Ehrlichman, he did this because they wanted to control the Black population in anti-war movement. Marijuana prohibition continues to target Black and brown communities. Most research shows that white and Black Americans use marijuana about the same rate, but African Americans in Delaware are more than 3 times more likely to be arrested for possessing it. Unjust enforcement reduces legitimacy of the police and the criminal justice system. My colleagues and I at the Law Enforcement Action Partnership have been supporting legalization for more than a decade, and I'm grateful that you're looking into this issue and pushing HB 150 forward. I hope that you and the legislature and the governor will help build a solid foundation for police community trust by legalizing and regulating marijuana. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Jacqueline Seafried, you've been permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hello, Chairman Benz and members of the House Health. My name is Jacqueline Seifried, and I live in Sussex County, Delaware. I've been a business owner for over 20 years, and I have single-handedly raised a son and also a grandson who was abandoned by his parents due to the opioids epidemic. I watched it unfold as legal drugs were dispensed accessibly to all ages. My sister died from her legal addiction, and my only son barely made it out of his alive. His saving grace through his withdrawal and staying clean for 5 years was because of the aid that he received from a harmless plant. I became an advocate for legalization shortly after looking for a supply of an illegal substance to calm his symptoms of a horrible withdrawal. There is no just cause or reason why this plant remains a Schedule I drug, when in fact, it's neither a drug or deadly. No one has ever died from it. One of our biggest oppositions comes from businesses worried about employees working under the influence, when the fact is they already do. Our roads aren't in any more danger than that of which alcohol is. The fact is that legalization should be the choice of each individual and be treated as alcohol. Please take the time to research the pros and cons and realize that the capital that the state could benefit as our surrounding states have or will have. I've been a consumer since I was a teenager and became a successful, law-abiding citizen, and I remember everything I've done the night before. Thank you for this time, and please vote yes to Bill H-150. Thanks.
As a reminder, if you would like to submit written comment, please do so to housecommitteecomments@delaware.gov. Once again, that's housecommitteecomments@delaware.gov. Sam Chick, you have a minute to speak. You have 2 minutes. Sam Chick?
Hi. Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sam Chick, representing Delcana, Movement to End Cannabis Prohibition in Delaware. Representative Oshinsky and members, thank you for your time. As you heard from others, HB150 needs improvement. First, it's not legal if you can't grow it. It's not justice, it's not equity, it's not liberty, it's none of these things when select businesses are able to grow and make money from cannabis, while everyday Delawareans are forbidden from growing it themselves under penalty of law. Cannabis is a useful plant, and there's no reason to continue prohibiting people from growing it if it's okay for businesses and the government to make money from growing it. Second, there should be no limit to the number of licenses. Limiting licenses establishes a cartel. We already have a cartel in the Delaware medical cannabis market, where limited competition causes high prices and lack of availability for patients. You already heard today from Fresh Delaware, who had a legal representative here advocating to continue their existing cartel, wanting to keep the number of businesses in the market limited because they don't want more competition. In case you didn't know, Fresh is one of these large multi-state cannabis companies that wants to limit local competition however it can. It's patients and consumers who suffer the most from limited licenses, from high prices and poor selection, just as they do under the current Delaware medical cannabis program, where they're paying 2 to 4 times or more what cannabis sells for in jurisdictions with more economic freedom. Limiting the number of licenses will cut out 99% of people who are interested in participating in this market. These bills, social equity and micro licenses, are a canard. Most people who have been subjected to previous criminal law, minorities and small businesses and farmers will still be kept out of the cannabis market because of the limited number of licenses. If this bill were to have truly equitable licensing, it wouldn't put a limit on the number of Delawareans who want to open cannabis businesses at all, and it would lower the license fees to a reasonable level in line with alcohol licenses. Limiting licenses also cuts out the many businesses who are already paying adult substance taxes and adhering to age limitations and existing regulations, such as liquor stores. In every state where cannabis prohibition is ended, alcohol sales fall. It's only fair that these businesses, which already operate in this space...
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Your 2 minutes are up.
Thank you. I'll submit it to the committee.
Steve Linton, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, how are you? My name is Steve Linton. I have been a Delaware resident all my life. I am also a recovering heroin addict. I had a heroin overdose 5 years ago that caused me to lose my leg. Aside from being the best thing that ever happened to me, pain was definitely a factor. Traditional medicine, I didn't want to take any of the pain meds that I could be for fear of relapsing. Getting the medical marijuana card was the best thing I could do. It stopped the phantom pains, the pains that I could not, for the life of me, get to go away. The medical marijuana helped. It got to the point where I couldn't afford it anymore. It was too much at the dispensaries, and I let my card lapse. Well, thanks to Columbia Care, they selected me as their adoptive family and have been providing my medication for the past year. They're great. It's a great system they got going there. I would not be able to afford the amount of medication that I get monthly from them. So it has been a huge help. Other than that, I know a lot of people that are still trying to get their card and they don't because the costs are so high. If this HB150 can get the costs of the license, the medical marijuana cards down, or the price at the dispensaries, because it's triple what you can get on the street. But the problem is, if you get on the street and you get arrested, you lose your card. And someone else touched on this, the supply wasn't really what it could have been. So I am in full support of HB 150. We need to expand and let this program affect everyone that it helps, because it can be a significant help. In my addiction,
Thank you, Mr. Linton. Your 2 minutes are up. Alyssa Bradley, you were permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, for allowing me to speak on this bill today. I am the coordinator for the Delaware Poor People's Campaign. We are one of 45 state chapters that operate nationally. It is part of our policy agenda to make sure that policies that disproportionately affect the poor and Black and Brown communities are addressed systematically. House Bill 150 is a great step to reducing the amount of damage dealt to Delawareans under the poverty line, as well as Black, Hispanic, and other minorities that exist in the state. We understand the trepidation. Marijuana has been demonized since the Nixon administration. But unfortunately, it is past time. Delaware needs to step up, and it needs to make sure that there are no more needless arrests for petty offenses, for minor offenses of drug use and possession. This bill, we do believe, over-regulates the sale, production, and consumption of marijuana. However, we will not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And we urge all of you to vote to move this bill out of committee. I will make that statement very clear. Move this bill out of committee. It doesn't mean that the conversation is over. It doesn't mean that all of these concerns brought to the table today will not be addressed, but the bill needs to move forward. There needs to be momentum on this issue. So thank you again for letting me speak, and I will submit written comments as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Olivia Noggle, you have permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Benz and members of the committee. My name is Olivia Noggle, and I'm a legislative analyst at the Marijuana Policy Project, or MPP. I'm here today in strong support of HB 150, and I want to thank Representative Ozinski for his leadership on this legislation. There are now 15 states that have ended cannabis prohibition and legalized cannabis for adult use, including red states like Montana and South Dakota, and including Delaware's neighbor, New Jersey. Delaware should follow suit by passing HB 150 this session. A strong majority of Delawareans recognize cannabis prohibition has failed and support replacing prohibition with a regulated system for adults 21 and older. The sooner Delaware moves forward with this sensible legislation, the sooner the state can promote public health and public safety by allowing cannabis production and sales to be conducted by licensed businesses rather than the illicit market. This approach frees up law enforcement resources to focus on serious crimes and creates a new source of jobs and revenue for the state. Lastly, as it's been mentioned, even after Delaware decriminalized cannabis in 2015, cannabis laws continue to be unequally enforced. Black Delawareans are still 4 times as likely to be arrested for cannabis possession than their white counterparts. And as a result of this disparity, Black Delawareans are far more likely to be plagued with an arrest record and conviction for cannabis, which makes it harder to get jobs, housing, and education, professional licensing, and other opportunities. By passing HB 150 this year, the state will further reduce cannabis-related arrests and police interactions, expunge past records for cannabis offenses, and begin to repair the decades of harm cannabis prohibition has caused, particularly in communities of color. Thank you for your time, and I respectfully urge a favorable report of HB 150.
Thank you. John Alfredo, you've been permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair Benz, Vice Chair Minor Brown, members of the committee. My name is John Alfredo, and I'm the Legislative and Communications Director with the Office of Defense Services. The ODS provides state-funded defense counsel to people charged with a crime in Delaware. We also help our clients with many different post-disposition services, such as expungements. We strongly support HB 150. The criminalization of marijuana is a failed public policy that has disproportionately impacted communities of color and left people with a scarlet letter in the form of a criminal conviction on their background checks. This legislation is one step to righting these wrongs and advancing racial justice and equality. The law on the books, as it is today, does not reflect reality. We know that people use marijuana, and regardless of what happens with this bill, they will continue to use marijuana. Let's join the growing number of states that have embraced legalization and passed HB 150. It will ease the burden on the justice system, including our attorneys, and shift the focus to serious matters of public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen O'Keefe, you have been to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'm the Director of State Policies of the Marijuana Policy Project. As my colleague Olivia Noggle explained, we strongly support HB 150. I wanted to address some concerns. It was claimed that teen marijuana use is up in Colorado. That is not true. All surveys of youth cannabis use in Colorado show rates are down since legalization. The large-scale Healthy Kids Colorado survey shows high schoolers' recent cannabis use decreased from 22% in 2011, which is pre-legalization, to 20.6% in 2019. Similarly, the National Survey on Drug Use and Health reports that marijuana use is down from 7.02% in 2019 to that's where it is now, from 10.74% immediately prior to legalization. Meanwhile, Colorado's high school graduation rates are up from 72% in 2010 to 81.1% in 2018. It was also suggested that the illicit market will continue to thrive in Delaware post-legalization. However, other states' experience suggests that after a few years, Delaware's illicit market will all but disappear. Colorado regulators reported in a 2017 report that, I quote, pre-existing illicit marijuana market for residents and visitors has been fully absorbed into the regulated market, end quote. While the intrastate demand in Colorado is satisfied by the illicit market, consumers from Delaware and the 34 other prohibition states continue to fuel demand for illegally exported cannabis. In other words, the problem driving the continued illicit cannabis market is prohibition, not legalization. Regarding traffic safety, a study from the American Journal of Public Health found, I quote, no significant association between recreational marijuana legalization in Washington and Colorado and subsequent changes in motor vehicle crash fatality rates in the first 3 years after recreational marijuana legalization, end quote. In closing, only legalization allows for regulatory control with protections for communities, the environment, cannabis consumers, and workers. Cannabis is far safer than alcohol, tobacco, and many medications. Grown-ups should not be penalized for consuming it. Thank you, and apologies for my neighbor's dog loudly barking.
Thank you. Andrea Brown-Clark, you have been to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, Chairman Benz and the members of the House Health and Human Development Committee. My name is Andrea Brown-Clark. I live in Townsend, Delaware, and I manage the Building People Power Economic Recovery Campaign with the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League. I'm the coordinator who develops community advocates with Network Delaware. I am a community chair for Delaware Poor People's Campaign, and I'm the newly appointed coalition coordinator for Delaware CAN. It is no longer okay to ignore the impacts of socioeconomic injustice issue. The time is now to address wellness, addiction, and economic concerns that are plaguing our communities. Said issues were exacerbated during the civil unrest of 2020 to include mental health crimes, opioid addiction, and increased criminalization in disenfranchised communities that have historically been marginalized and compromised. HB 150 addresses the social equity injustices that will allow those historically marginalized to monetize through entrepreneurism and business ownership, as well as to reinvest in their communities when cannabis is legalized. If you haven't guessed by now, I ask that you please vote yes for House Bill 150. From a personal perspective, over the past 7 years, I've been struggling with pain management as a result of a car accident in 2013, which left me with several herniated discs and nerve damage along my dominant right side. Through no fault of my own, I was rear-ended and my life was changed immediately in an instant. Doctors quickly prescribed opioids, which I took initially because we're taught to follow the physician's advice. But as a wife of 23 years, a mother of two, now 17 and 21, I quickly realized that this was by no means fixing my injuries and or curing my pain. Against their advice, I discontinued the usage and did several colon cleanses to flush the pills out of my system. I was then told, outside of surgery, I had achieved my best recoverable self, which meant simply that I was going to have to learn to live with the pain. For almost 7 years, I did just that. Which meant there were days and weeks, and especially during the fall and winter, were months where I could not participate in life due to daily activities like.
Thank you, Ms. Brown Clark. Your 2 minutes are up. Harley Cooper, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes. Harley Cooper?
Hold on, go ahead.
Yes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to me today. My name is Arlie Cooper. I was born in the state of Delaware, Kent County. I'm a Delaware State Trooper retired. I was a Delaware State Trooper from April 1962 until April 1982. I'm going to compare marijuana to alcohol. Marijuana is illegal. Alcohol is legal. I investigate hundreds, maybe thousands of accidents, and a lot of them was caused by people driving under the influence. None of them was caused by people driving under the influence of marijuana. You heard earlier that my daughter, Lisa Healy, uses marijuana for her migraine headaches, and she says that they help. And I'm here to tell you that it really does. I think marijuana should be legalized. If it's not legalized and police comes across somebody with marijuana, they got a choice. Arrest him for possession, using, or selling. That's a criminal violation. He has to be processed, go to the troop, take pictures, fingerprints, and all that stuff, write a report, that takes time. Then he has to go to court for arraignment, that takes time. If the person pleads not guilty, he has to go to trial and testify. That takes time. If it was legalized, marijuana was legalized, it would be all taken care of. He wouldn't have to do that. He would be out there on the highway taking care of things that's important. Some people say, hey, where's all the cops? You never see a cop. And somebody else will say, well, they're in the restaurant drinking coffee and eating donuts. Well, everybody likes donuts, everybody likes coffee, but that may not be the reason. That officer is tied up on something that's illegal that should be legal. He's processing somebody for marijuana. I don't think you should have to do that. I'm asking you now, as a retired Delaware State Trooper, to pass this bill and legalize marijuana. It would help the people in Kent County, in the state of Delaware. You could get tax revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Your 2 minutes are up.
Thank you.
Edward Miller, you've been permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I want to thank the committee for allowing me to speak. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So my name is Ed Miller. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for Compassionate Care Research Institute with medical oversight of Fresh Delaware Dispensary in Newark for the past 3 years. I'm a board-certified internist with 35 years of clinical experience, and I was past president of MedStar Physician Partners, part of MedStar Health in the Maryland, D.C. area. I was first introduced to medical cannabis through my daughter, who was being treated for stage 4 breast cancer. She was guided to the correct strain of cannabis by the medical dispensary in San Francisco. This then helped her with her desired symptom relief and allowed her to continue working as long as possible. I have served as medical director of marijuana dispensaries in multiple states and coordinate clinical research trials involving patients suffering from serious debilitating illness. Our dispensary is very patient focused. Our board chairman, Dennis Klima, was the CEO of Bay Health Hospital System for decades, so it's part of our mission. The bill without changes would flood the market with 10 times as many growers as New Jersey has had for the past decade. They have 9 million people. But by not allowing us medical cannabis compassionate centers to automatically participate in adult use sales, we would not be able to financially survive. You've already heard about Oregon going to losing most of their medical cannabis sites when they were legalized. This subjects sick, frail medical patients to an unchecked recreational market where the push will be to sell high THC products, which may be detrimental to their health and well-being, especially if their conditions require a high CBD strain of extract products. I sit on the Medical Society Cannabis task force in another state, where physicians complain routinely that their patients are being pushed by the dispensaries to high THC products. Many of these patients are new to the cannabis world and are experiencing adverse side effects that require further medical intervention. I don't believe you want to harm your sick medical patients who rely on cannabis as an adjunct to their medical regimen, but that is an inevitable consequence if you pass the bill as written. Thank you.
Thank you. Janae Duffy, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, members of the House Health and Human Development Committee. My name is Jean Duffy. I live in Milton, Delaware. I am a nurse, medical cannabis consultant. I'm a member of the American Cannabis Nurses Association and the Cannabis Nurses of Color. I ask that you please vote yes on HB 150. Signing on HB 150 increases access and removes barriers to low-income patients who cannot afford the expensive registration requirements and the annual costs. With 50 cultivators, there will be an increase in strain availability and decreased prices for more affordability. With the bill HB 150, it will provide a platform for safe access with significant consumer safety provisions, including a rigorous testing and labeling requirements to ensure a safe product. Once again, I ask that you vote yes on HB 150, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lynn Keelhorn, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Keelhorn. I'd like to very briefly register my support for HB 150. I'm an active advocate for criminal justice reform. Removing cannabis from the criminal code will prevent a significant amount of law enforcement interactions. According to the Delaware Statistical Analysis Center, there are about 6,000 possession-only offenses in Delaware annually, which make up 52% of all drug offenses. Cannabis is the #1 tool law enforcement uses to establish probable cause and circumvent Fourth Amendment constitutional protections. This bill will literally protect thousands and thousands annually. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron Epstein, you have permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Aaron Epstein, and I serve as COO of Cantech Delaware LLC, one of the successful applicants in the recent cannabis RFP, which doubled the number of medical providers in the state. Like other companies who won in that round, we are proud to be Black and Brown owned, a social equity provider. First, we appreciate Representative Osinski's efforts to legalize. He is our hero for taking that step, and we look forward to working with him on legalization. Most respectfully, we're shocked to see a bill that would put us out of business before we even have a chance to open our doors. In this bill, medical dispensaries don't automatically get grandfathered into recreational. Other states have all done the opposite. Medical suppliers are the only ones to supply recreational for that initial few years, and then you open it up to additional vendors so that the medical and small business operators have the chance to recoup their capex. Also, the proposed number of growers in this bill would allow sufficient canopy for Delaware to supply all the legal and illegal marijuana on the East Coast. History has taught us the dangers of not having reasonable caps on the number of cultivation licenses. To say that Oregon and Colorado had an oversupply issue is a vast understatement. Without reasonable caps on cultivation in 2017 and 2018, Oregon authorities estimated that demand in the adult use cannabis space was running at just 50% of the supply. That left Oregon with approximately 1.3 million pounds of cannabis. That staggering amount was enough to last until mid-2025 without the state having a single more plant. But we're proud to support legalization, but ask that you don't decimate the medical cannabis industry in the process, harming patients and putting a pot shop on every corner in Delaware. This bill will take away the ability for social equity applicants to survive in the industry. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. As a reminder, if you'd like to submit written comment, please do so at housecommitteecomments@delaware.gov. Once again, that's housecommitteecomments@delaware.gov. Dustin McDonald, you've been permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Benz and members of the House Human Development Committee. My name is Dustin McDonald, and I'm the Interim Policy Director for Americans for Safe Access, which is the oldest and largest organization of patients, physicians, researchers, and citizens promoting safe and legal access to cannabis for therapeutic use and research. I'm speaking today to thank members of this committee and the General Assembly for continuing to work to expand cannabis reforms in Delaware, but also to raise concerns with the state's existing medical program on behalf of patients. ASA produces a report every year that scores state program functionality in serving medical cannabis patients. And what we found with states that have organized adult use reforms is that by and large across those states, they have significant gaps in their medical policy that directly negatively impacts patients. These gaps range from lack of patient rights and civil protections to product safety, affordability, and access. Some of these outstanding items that Americans for Safe Access and patients would like to see addressed in Delaware before the state jumps into adult use fall into this category. And those include things, some of which have been mentioned today, like ensuring that there are employer protections for patients. Patients shouldn't be discriminated against for the type of medicine they use when it comes to where they work. Issues with lab testing standards, product labeling, quality and diversity to serve patient needs, as well as product affordability, and the need to expand the list of patient-eligible qualifying conditions. For these reasons, I'd ask the committee and the General Assembly to spend some time working on these issues before jumping into adult use. Again, we've seen across states, certainly some pioneer states like California and Oregon provide an example here where the population of licensed retailers for medical consumers shrank substantially in Oregon from 400 total in 2016 to just 1 today. And the integrity of the medical system from a regulatory standpoint also suffered in these markets as regulators and lawmakers pivoted to address a lot of challenges with adult use while not bothering to fix a lot of the outstanding challenges with medical. For these reasons, I would ask that this committee and the General Assembly, again, pivot back to spending some more time on addressing some of the outstanding policy gaps in medical before pivoting to adult use. And I look forward to working with the author of this bill and this committee to help in that regard in any way possible. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Chairman, that is the end of public comment. You may proceed.
Thank you. So I'm going to thank everybody for coming out today and for sharing their thoughts with us. I know that was a very long meeting, and I think we had a really good discussion. Did I see Representative Baumback?
Yes, motion to release the bill.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second.
I have my hand up.
Representative Shoup, do you have a question on the motion, or Representative? No? Okay. Representative, so now we're going to move on to the roll call. Representative Bentz, yes. Representative Minor Brown?
Yes.
Representative Chukwucha?
Yes.
Representative Johnson?
Yes.
Representative Baumback?
Yes.
Representative Heffernan?
Yes.
Representative Morrison?
Yes.
Representative Kowalko?
Yes.
Representative Lynn?
Yes.
Representative Postles?
No.
Representative Shoup?
Yeah, I'd like to quick statement that, whether for or against this bill, there's way too many issues and questions to be answered. We heard from our own state agencies and our trusted partners about major concerns. I was going to favor the bill. I think we need to correct these issues, because even after we correct all of these issues that we heard from the health partners, there's going to be many more questions. At this point, I'm voting no.
Can I just confirm, were you voting no on the motion to release Representative Shoup?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Representative Smith?
Yes.
Representative Briggs King?
No.
Representative Hensley?
No.
Representative Collins?
No. No.
Having received the required number of votes, the motion carries. The bill will be released. To close remarks here today, the legislative fellow will immediately email all members with the list of bills released from committee after this meeting. Please make sure you forward your FMUs for each bill to the Chief Clerk, Richard Puffer, within the hour. Now we have concluded this meeting. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.